Town Council meeting of March 27th to order. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3 is attendance. I am joined by all my fellow town councilors today. We will now go to public comment. Sherry, is there anyone for public comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. We do have Bill Spalding tonight. I'm going to bring him over. Hi, Bill. Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking my submission.
Hi, Bill. Just if you could introduce yourself and give your address, and just to remind everyone giving public comment, you have 3 minutes, and this is not a back and forth. Just I'll be watching the clock, but please introduce yourself and your address.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Bill Spalding. I live at 42 Gould Street. I am an elected official on the planning board, but I'm not here tonight to speak for the planning board. I am speaking, though, for Safe Streets. I'm also part of that group, and I wanted to address meetings from last week. I am just getting up to speed on the current preliminary plans for the Northeast Metro Tech and the proposed site, and attending the CONCOM meeting on Tuesday and the ZBA meeting on Wednesday. Sorry, I'm throwing things at my kids because they're making too much noise eating. I wanted to address that the plans do not show any safe route to school. And I'm hoping that all the town councilors take a closer look at the plans and notice that from the proposed Farm Street after June Circle going up past the power lines and into the school, there's no sidewalks. There are no sidewalks, and there are no separated bike lanes or paths for walking. The representative from the building committee for Northeast Metro Tech mentioned that they would have sharrows on the road, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's just a painted biker on the road, which looks like the biker got hit by a car and just left there. They're not safe. They give false security. They're super dangerous, and I don't think people would want to bike through that, especially if the road is narrowed to 20 feet as recommended. So I'd like to see if the town council will take a closer look. I'd also like, in the plans from the entrance to Breakheart through the parking lots, Hemlock Road, that they also provide some type of separated bike lane or pedestrian path, walkway, because right now there's nothing but parking lots and barely any sidewalks to connect from one to the other. So I would just challenge the town council to take a close look at the plans and make sure we have safe routes to school. That's all.
Thank you, Bill. WCAT, can we just work on the volume from the TV? It's really low. I don't think we have any, well, do we have any other people for public comment, Sherry?
The only one, Madam Chair, is a written submission that you should have all received from Sherry Carlson.
Yes, so I think we all received that. That will be entered into public comment. Thank you so much.
Sure, that's all we have for tonight.
Great. Oh, you sound much better, much louder. Thank you.
Oh good.
Okay, I'm taking chairperson's prerogative, and we are putting something ahead on the agenda. We're going to item number 6. No, I'm sorry. We're going to item number 8, annual town meeting article.
Hi, everybody. The warrant article for the capital budget for 2024. You all should have a copy if you all had a chance to review it. Good. I'm just going to run over some highlights with the presentation. Our committee, we've had the same committee, I think we're on 2 years now, and most of our members have been there 3 or 4 years, so we have a good committee going. Myself, Dan, David, Philip, Tracy, Jeff, and Frank Conti. Real quick overview of the process. Each fall, the town departments submit their requests to to our committee, to Joe Conway at the DPW. The requests are compiled into a spreadsheet for evaluation and review. And the initial tax request this year for our committee was well over $6 million for the tax levy. The water is at 842, and the sewer at 667. We invite all the interested department heads in if they feel like there's going to be something that they feel we won't approve, or that if they feel is pretty urgent, especially with the school department and the IT. We want to hear, because they usually have a lot of requests, so we want to know what they are and how urgent they are. We try to establish a yearly plan lately to get around approximately $2 million. The last couple of years, we've been hovering around that, obviously, except for the COVID year when we had to cut back a little bit. And again, I'm just going to highlight some of the bigger dollar items, but if there's any other items on there you want to review, just let me know. Usually, the police department gets their 3 cruisers that makes up for any depletion in their force. There's another sidewalk plow. You see those sidewalk plows? There's a picture of it bombing around town. That's what gets the sidewalks open pretty quick. We're pretty confident that this will last them after this one is purchased. It'll last them for a while. And because if you notice, it's not up here, but it's on the list. It says lease to purchase. So it's around a $200,000 item. So for the next 5 years, we'll put it on for $45,000 a year, so that we can get something like that on there. And then Cushman UTV for the Parks Department to be used mostly in the cemeteries. A couple of large items on the buildings. We actually have 3 roofs on this year. Not that they all went in the same year, but they were pretty reasonably priced. So we wanted to get them all in there. The town hall rubber roof, you can see in the photo, there's only one section left in the town hall that needs to be re-roofed. The others have already been done. So that'll take care of the town hall. $55,000 for the Albion Street Cultural Exchange. That'll take care of that entire roof and waterproof that to go further in the future to do other renovations over there. The BB Library, $130,000, takes care of about 90% of that roof, so that'll be fine. They've been having a lot of issues over the last couple of years, and it's been getting worse. And a chiller AC replacement over at the Woodville. These are going to be our next big dollar items coming up over the next couple of years, because they're all starting to need a lot more work every year. And we were told that this one is the one that was most urgent. So you can see for $230,000, it's going to be a hit every year if it's going to be, a good percentage of our budget. A couple other small items is a mobile post lift. You'll see right there with the truck on top of it, so that the DPW can do repairs in their own area without sending it out. And they need something that can take care of the larger trucks as well. Just the $20,000 for 2 outdoor water fountains to be replaced at the lake. You can see that one from Vets Field that's getting all rotted out there. They're all kind of rotten out, but we figure we'll do a couple a year possibly. And the fire department has new lockers for the Greenwood Station, 12 new lockers, because they were getting kind of old. So our recommended budget this year, $2,239,875 to come from the tax levy. That is up 6.7% from last year. I know we were trying to stay with 5%, but if you look at one of the items on the list, I should have put it up here, the monument restoration for $300,000. We're pretty confident that, well, Joe's pretty confident we're going to get a $100,000 grant for that. So that'll bring us down. That'll bring us down below the 5% increase. So we feel, well, Joe feels pretty confident about that. So hopefully that'll be fine. And I didn't go. So the water enterprise was $667,000, and the sewer enterprise was $477,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think it's a really good committee. How many meetings did you have? You had a number of meetings.
Six or seven
Six or seven
since
meetings.
February.
It's very difficult to trim 6.7 or $7 million down to around 2. And at the end of the year, and at the end of other years, sometimes things come in a little bit cheaper. Not all the time, but we hope they do. Kevin closes that out to the general fund. So if we end up getting, a truck that's, 22,000 instead of 25, and we didn't need it to put on a rack or something, that money closes up to the general fund. I do agree with the assessment. I'm very hopeful on the grant. So there's $100,000 right there that would go back to the general fund. They did a great job, and it's a fun committee to work with, actually.
Yeah, just to echo that, I went to your last committee, 2 committee meetings ago, and it's run very well. I thought it was really great discussion. Do want to give Joe Conway credit for in real time updating spreadsheets. The other, and we talked a lot about looking at grants, kind of continuing a theme of this council. Steve, the library roof was also something we were going to look into, right? If there's,
Yes, if we can get some library funds for that, that certainly cuts that
if
down.
there's still some left,
Yep.
but something, a smaller part of that. So,
And the other thing is that there's a lot of money out there for energy efficiencies right now. And what we've been told by the Department of DOE, our Department of Energy Resources, that, maybe I shouldn't say this on camera, but any item that is in a school is going to, on a competitive grants, which will be going forward when they come out a little bit later, get a lot more, have a lot more cachet than anything else. So there's some items on the list that are energy efficient that we feel we'll be able to get from the competitive grants. So those are ones that we certainly wanted to move over to, not to fund with tax levy, to fund those with grants. So you'll be seeing a lot more of that in the next 6 months.
And does that include some of the green communities? grants as
Yes,
well?
yes, that as well. But, and on the DOER grants, there's like a guaranteed money, so-called guaranteed, then there's a competitive side. So we certainly want to use the competitive side on the schools where we're more competitive. So, but the chiller we talked about, the chiller on Woodville was critical. I think that had to happen.
And I assume we'll look for the most energy efficient that we can for that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
no, that's okay. Good. I think folks have energy questions. Counselor Smith Galvin is the person to go to. Any other questions or comments? Counselor Dombrowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, first off. I know that your team puts in a tremendous amount of work, and these are not easy decisions to be made. In looking at some of these things, one thing that struck me is there ever an opportunity, and I don't know if you can answer this, or maybe Steve, or maybe Kevin, is there ever an opportunity, if we were to leverage it with some other communities, say instead of buying like 2 water fountains, say we bought like 12, would there be any ability to realize savings? That being one example, but maybe that's not the best. Would we see that?
Joe always has a good answer for that. Do you have a good answer for that, Steve?
No, I want to hear Joe's. I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying. If we buy 12
Yeah.
in bulk, do we get them a little bit cheaper?
Right.
Because I guess
Yeah.
part of what I'm thinking about, for example, you mentioned the water fountains,
Yeah.
and if we find, hey, by the way, again, just as an example, they're really well priced for whatever reason right now. We're just going to do 2 a year. Should we maybe do 12, this year? We have the ARPA funds to be thinking about things like that. Were there types of projects like that? It seems like the roofs, you felt like there was a pretty good value to be had in those.
It comes down to, we basically get presented what the urgent items are.
Yeah.
And we try to look at the value. And that, I think that one specifically, the library was half the cost of what it was last year. I'm pretty sure that was the roof from last year. It was like $250,000 last year, and what's it this year?
Like 130, I think.
130, yeah.
130, yeah.
So it seemed like we were getting a good value. And obviously, when she presented to us, she was saying how everything's, it's becoming a lot of spots where everything's getting wet. And it moved right up on the urgency. And then, yeah, Joe Conway does all the finagling with these prices, and he got someone to come in with that price. And he felt obviously very confident that that's what we're going to pay. These aren't just numbers that we think it's going to cost us. These, by the time it hits this final report, they are solid numbers that the vendors know that if it's approved in July, that we want you to do it and do it this year.
But it just strikes me with some of these, again, I understand the importance of trying to keep a percentage, but instead of looking at it on an annual basis, we're to say like over a 5-year basis, so some things like, hey, this seems to be the year, fiscal 24 is the year to do roofs, so do we try to lean into that, even if it's, because net over the 5-year, we're going to realize the cost savings potentially on doing that, so we'll get more and more bang for our buck.
It's hard. Like 2 years ago, these roofs probably weren't on there.
Yeah.
I think the town hall roof was, but he used other funds to, like I said, this is the last section of the town hall roof, so he used other funds to get the other rubber section done and the shingles done. So that's the other part of it. If it does, we do carry it over. Sometimes, Joe and Steve find, whether it's ARPA or whatever funds if something becomes urgent. But the committee's very aware, and we ask all the time, but it's not as simple as just saying, can we just plan out 5 years for water fountains, 5 years for roofs? At this point, we might have to try to plan out 5 years for chillers and ACs, but again, it might be on something first fix situation, because that's just sometimes what it comes down to. So that's where it's harder to plan. Maybe trucks, I think vehicles.
I think it's a good point that, we try to do a lot with shared services.
Right.
And maybe there's shared
That's
buying,
what I'm
like
wondering,
maybe,
is buying
maybe like
power.
a bituminous hot box trailer. Are they all, I don't know, they're probably all basically the same. So maybe
Right.
if we need one in Reading one and.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and we should look into that in the future. That's a great point. Thank you.
And with
Yeah.
those water fountains, I don't know. Thinking about the lake, for some reason, it feels like if we're replacing two, if we're doing multiple at the same time, I feel like there's got to be efficiencies recognized there. Like, I don't know. Like, it would seem like, and again, I understand you're budgeting as you should, certainly. But I think from our perspective, maybe it's something we should be looking at as a council too, because.
I think it's a great point. We will do that. I'll talk to Joe tomorrow. He might be watching now.
Counselor, when you started talking, I thought you meant like we should buy 12 water fountains and then like sell them to Melrose. Like maybe
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what we should. And I was like,
No,
I don't know if we want to do that.
No, all of those markups are going to go to it's always Linfield. Linfield always has the markup, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Some of those bigger items in I think the shared services, it's not a bad thing to think about.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good point. So maybe Joe will come and
Yeah.
report back to us. Counselor Chines.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, Frank,
You're welcome.
for the work that you and your committee do. I know this is a lot, and every year you talk about going from 7 million of requests down
Yeah.
to 2, and that's no easy task. And I mean, in that 7 million, there's a lot that we haven't funded that obviously has a lot of merit and has a lot of need behind it. And so thinking about that, this is more of a kind of an internal observation, maybe for us and for Mr. Mayo, but to the extent that we do have grant opportunities and chances to use other funds for capital, I do hope that we look at then, maybe taking some of the dollars that we've saved and applying it to some of the capital projects that maybe didn't make the cut this year. I mean, we still, we're pretty good about spending $2 million a year, which I think is a really important fiscal policy for us to follow to make sure that we're keeping up with our infrastructure and our assets. Obviously, we spent $1 million less in 1 year. And again, we know that the need is still out there. So I would just maybe ask us to consider, if we find some grant opportunities, if we find some ways to take some of these dollars out of the tax levy, that we make sure that we're also, looking at what we can replace those projects with, so that, if we end up doing $2.5 or $3 million this year and getting ahead of some of these projects, I think that would be money well spent.
Counselor Vincent?
Madam Chair. Actually, Public Works is going to be applying for even more than one grant on the memorial. There's another one. It's only 15,000, and the application deadline is November. So they are actively looking at other grants as well. This is my first time going through the budget process, so bear with me. I just have a couple questions about the fire department. So the fire department has 4 pumpers. One is from 2000, one's from 2006. They both cost about $1 million each for a pumper. The life expectancy is 15 to 20 years, and right now there's a 2-year wait between ordering it and delivery. So is that something that the committee is looking at down the road? Because those 2 pumpers are probably going to have to be replaced by the end of the decade, and then the ladder truck is dated 2013. We have one that also has a 15 to 20 year life expectancy. So by sometime in the early part of the next decade, so 2033. That's $2 million. That would have to be purchased, and that also has a 2-year waiting period between order and delivery. So how is that evaluated by your committee?
We usually address that more with a warrant article. If $1 million would pretty much eat up half our budget.
Yeah.
And that's how we've done it. Was it 2013 from the ladder truck?
Yes,
That's when
2013.
That was. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. And I know we bought 2 pumpers in the last 12 years.
Right. One in
So we have been-
2017
We
and
do address it
2021.
every couple of years, but it's obviously recommended by the capital planning committee
Yeah.
at the town meeting as a separate warrant article. But that's how we've addressed it, correct?
Correct, and we also try to keep that in our existing bond schedule. So if it's $1 million, and let's say it's 10 years on a fire truck, it's $100,000 a year. So as we have things fall off of our existing bond schedule,
Okay.
then this is outside of the schools, because they're outside of 2.5. We try to replenish them with things like this.
All right, well, thank you.
No problem.
Counselor McLean?
Thanks for your work, Frank. I just had two quick questions, and one of them, I don't want to put you on the spot. I can offline it with Joe if
Yeah.
necessary, but, you know, when I see Chiller 230, it makes sense to me. But there's also system improvements, $1.50, whatever it may be, that are more generic. Do you have a feel for those, or is that something I should ask Joe about?
That's a Joe question, but usually it's that money's there, so as things come up. Because there's things he wants to do over the next year, but something else might come up and blow a water main in the street and become more urgent. But that's a good Joe question to give you specifics.
Right. It's a small matter, but I wonder when I see cruisers, if they're 70 apiece and it's 3 times 70 is 210.
Yeah.
I assume, you know, we're going to have a trade-in. And it would seem that, you know, there's probably a history of what we get on trade-ins. I was just curious if it's 70 minus 20 or something, why don't we make that, $1.50?
Technically, there's a breakdown. I didn't bring it with me. The chief does give a breakdown. The cars aren't 70. I'm going to go off the top of my head, say the car is 50. Then you have to outfit it for
Right.
another 10. You have to
Right.
put the radios and everything. And so that's where the 70 comes from. And by the time they get to the end of their lives, the chief explains it very well. You know, they're running all the time, just idle half the time, just sitting, waiting around. There's not much to trade.
Okay,
They keep the good ones, maybe give them to detectives to go to Malden for court, and then there's times when they get in an accident, and hopefully we get a little bit of insurance money to replace it. But we try to stay. I've been on the committee for a little while. There was a year or two where we'd gone down to 2 because the chief said, you know, we just get 2 this year because we don't need 3. And then the next year he says, well, we lost 2 more, so we need 4. So 3 is a pretty steady. And this number would justify our increase because 10 years ago, I want to say it was $100,000 or $110,000 for 3 cruisers. Yeah, they were cars back then, they were different. Now they're SUVs, but now that money's doubled in 10 years, probably less than 10 years, especially with all the electronics in the cars. But
right. How big is the fleet? Do you happen to know?
how much? What?
How many cars in the fleet?
No,
Okay.
it's been 4 or 5 years since we've got a list from, since it was the old chief
Yeah.
was the last one that we got a list from, and we haven't, we should ask that. I'll definitely ask that next year so we get a full
Okay,
list.
yeah, I can get that in the meantime. Steve can.
Yeah.
get
I
it. Yeah,
requested the chief was at training today, so I'll probably
Okay.
have that
yeah,
tomorrow.
just curious. Thanks very much.
No problem, you're welcome.
I can jump in on the water and sewer systems if you want, the system upgrade. So
Sure.
when water work is being done, there may be gates that we don't know about that need to be done, so that would fall in there. Also hydrants, when we have to replace hydrants, they're about four grand each. So there might be 20 hydrants we're thinking about in there. That might be a good one if we combine with someone else, we get them for 3 grand each, that'd be pretty good, right? So that's a thing to do. In sewer, a lot of it is, when we're doing sewer work, we might have to do manhole rebuilds. So a lot of it, that is the system improvements there. So this is kind of dovetailing on to the other kind of I&I and the other work that we're doing. But Joe will give you a much better explanation than I can.
Thanks, Steve.
Any other questions or comments, Counselor Chines?
Just one other question, and actually I was thinking about this when Councilman McLean brought up the fleet question, but I know it's been a year and a half, I think, since we did our fleet policy. It might be, I think it would be worthwhile kind of, you know, having sort of an update on that in the somewhat near future. You know, just as an example, we talked about the availability of what was available from a hybrid or electric perspective for some of the vehicles. You know, to the extent that that's changed since we did the fleet policy, it'd be interesting to, you know, and informative, I think, for us as a council to understand where that stands.
Okay, yep, we can do that.
We will add that to the agenda to find out about those electric fire engines.
Well, I was thinking more police cruisers, and actually, I think it was a state police cruiser that I saw a couple of days ago that was a hybrid. So I don't know if that's something that we actively look at, but
Yeah.
I'm sure it's top of mind for the chief anyway.
I know the chief's looking at
Yeah, right. I think he says they're almost there. He's almost there, but we can take a look. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Frank, thank you so much. So
Thanks,
this will
everybody.
be on,
Thank you.
a warrant article for town meeting on May 15th, which is a Monday at 7 PM.
I'll be there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, going back to the agenda, we are going to go to item 5, easement. 125 Pleasant Street.
McGrail, here on behalf of Sanderson Do Nascimento, who is the owner of, it's actually 123 Pleasant Street in Wakefield. Sanderson purchased that property in January of 2021. And pursuant to his due diligence at that time, when he purchased it, it was discovered that there's an easement that basically goes through the center of the property for the benefit of the town of Wakefield. It's a drainage easement that impacts that area of town and cuts pretty much right through the middle of his property. The story gets worse from there because the due diligence further discovered that the house on the lot actually encroached into the easement area by a little bit. That was compounded by the fact that Sanderson wanted to put an addition onto the house, which would go further into the easement area. So what he did, he endeavored to contact the town administration, specifically the town engineer, to discuss about the possibility of relocating that easement on his property to push it over further away from the house, more to the edge of the property. And the town engineer, Bill Renault, as he usually is, was very cooperative with Sanderson. Sanderson retained an engineering firm, worked with Mr. Renault to look at that. It actually went on town meeting warrant for the annual town meeting in May of 2021 for town meeting to vote the authority of your council to relocate that easement. That town meeting warrant article passed unanimously at that town meeting. So now the jurisdiction is before your board. We conducted further work with Mr. Renault, and we came up with a good location for that easement. You can see the plan there. It's kind of there's a lot of things happening on that plan, but there's two hash lines and two different easements marked out with two different hash lines, and the shorter lines are where the existing easement is, and the larger lines is where we propose to move it over. So that's shown on the plan. But in any event, your council has authority to vote to approve this. Sanderson has agreed to pay all costs associated with this. He is going to have to relocate the pipe under the supervision of Mr. Renault, which he's agreed to do. And he's prepared to do that. And also there's going to be some recording fees with the Registry of Deeds. In the event your council votes to approve the relocation of the easement, then I would endeavor to work with Tom Mullen, Town Council, to come up with the appropriate documents for you to sign in that regard. And we're also we're in the process of approaching Sanderson's lender, who will have to also sign off on it to subordinate that easement to make sure that the town gets priority. And I'll work with Tom Mullen and the bank council in that regard. So respectfully, we would like your support and vote for this. I've actually provided a draft vote or motion in my letter that I believe Town Council has had an opportunity to review. Happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Steve, any additional comments, or Tom?
No, I think this is really carrying out what town meeting's will was, the will of town meeting a couple years ago, but Tom may want to jump in, he's reviewed.
No, I agree, and I've reviewed the language from Attorney McGrail about the vote, and I think it's appropriate, so I have no problem with your board agreeing to the request.
Any questions? Counselor Dabrowski?
Just, I guess, on the town side, do we just have confirmation that the proposed relocation meets the needs of the town without any issues? I'm assuming so. But
Yes, I think there's a letter in there from engineering.
Yep, so
supporting it, yeah.
Everything is
Yeah.
checked off in that box.
Yeah.
Right, so it seems- And Mr. McGrail, did you say your client was also going to, you said he's going to absorb the cost of this. Did you mention trees too? Did I hear you mention tree?
Trees.
Trees. Donating trees to the town as well? A very nice gesture if you were to do that.
He might plant some on his own property. That works well, too.
Any other questions, comments? Do I have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. Move to approve the relocation and/or reconfiguration of the drainage easement on 123 Pleasant Street in Wakefield, Massachusetts, including the abandonment of the existing drainage easement and the acquisition or acceptance of the new replacement drainage easement, all is shown on the plan entitled Plot Plan of Land, Wakefield, Mass., prepared for Sanderson Do Nascimento, 123 Pleasant Street, with a revised date of February 3, 2023. prepared by David P. Terranzoni, PLS, conditioned upon and subject to the approval of documents to the satisfaction of Town Council, accomplishing the same, which, when so approved, will be signed by the Town Council and recorded at Middlesex South Registry of Deeds with recording fees paid to by the owner of the property.
Second. We missed you last week.
I bet you did.
It was a mess.
It really was.
I can't leave you alone at all.
Seriously, you can't go away
You really
again.
can't.
We have a motion, it's been seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye, 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Appreciate it.
Good luck. Moving on, item number 6, 460 Main Street update.
Great, thank you. I have quite the crew here with me, so I'm gonna start alone, and some might join.
They're welcome to bring chairs and sit around the
I
table.
think we're fine. I'll make some introductions, if I may, Madam Chair, if that's okay with you. As you mentioned, this is regarding 460 to 472 Main Street in Wakefield. And again, for the record, Attorney Brian McGrail representing the owner. The owner of the property is Alexandros Citos, who is here. He is a trustee of the entity that owns the property. Also is Andreas Citos, which is Alexandros' son, and also the property manager of the property. Peter Sandors, a Wakefield resident, principal of Phoenix Architects, is here, and his associate Steve DeFuria, also from Phoenix Architects. And last but not least, Scott Fitzpatrick is here, who is our construction consultant on the project. Knowing that the town council has an interest in this property because of the current condition of the property, or lack thereof, and the prominent location of the property in the town, Town Administrator Mayo asked us to attend tonight's council meeting to provide a status update on the revitalization efforts on this property. Since my client last met with your council a while ago, they have put together an experienced redevelopment team consisting of Phoenix, also Rick Salvo of Engineering Alliance, which is an engineering firm, site civil engineering firm out of Saugus, who's done quite a bit of work in Wakefield to work on this project. Scott Thornton from Vanessa Associates, who is a traffic engineer, to also be on the redevelopment team, and Scott Fitzpatrick and myself. Andreas, who is going to oversee this project, as I mentioned, the property manager, has a significant amount of real estate experience. I've had the pleasure of working with Andreas on a number of projects throughout the greater Boston area. He's a significant property owner, and I've worked with him on lending processes and also permitting processes on his properties. So I can vouch for him. He's very experienced, very well respected in the industry. We have spent a significant amount of time developing a business pro forma and development plans for the project that we believe will serve the property well, the property owner well, and the entire town of Wakefield well, and we're excited to share them with you tonight. The project is comprised of 16 residential units with a combination of other uses, which might be retail, service establishments, and/or restaurants on the property. All applications for the project have been filed with the Board of Appeals, which is the jurisdictional board for this project, and our public hearings will commence with the Board of Appeals this April, about 3 weeks from now. The project, as is usually the case, will involve several public hearings before the Board of Appeals. It will also involve the Wakefield Traffic Advisory Committee to look at the traffic impacts of the project and any mitigation that might be needed. And we'll also have a lot of communication with the town administration to make sure that the project works well with the Envision project that is coming to Main Street, as they always do. And we're happy to participate that in the main streets and make sure it's going to fit in nice in downtown. If the project at the end of the day is approved by the Board of Appeals, because again, it's subject to their approval, 18% of the residential units will be affordable as required under Article 6, Section 190-32 of our zoning bylaw. So if it ends up being 16 units, 3 of those units will be affordable units. We have prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you, if we may, to give you an idea of the project. And with that process, I'd like to invite Steve DeFuria. Steve, you want to come up with me, if you could? So I'm probably going to take the beginning of this. Do you want to run this since I don't know how?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll be back on the capital budget. You can go to the next one, Steve. Okay, so this is just kind of the cover sheet. So this is, you can see Main Street is at the bottom. All those spaces up front are the retail, service establishment, or restaurants, which Steve will get into a little bit of a detail. As you're facing the building, there is a driveway. You see those arrows going back and forth. They lead behind the building to a parking garage that will be used for the residential units. It'll be under the building. Go back to that for a second, Steve. And we have, I think, 22 parking spaces that we're actually able to fit in there, which is kind of amazing in the downtown area. Next one, Steve. So this is really just the existing conditions of the property, which is really, I think the council's pretty familiar with that, so you can kind of move through this. This is more of a detail of the layout of the site plan. A lot of the stuff on the top in those boxes are zoning requirements, which will be very relevant when we get before the Zoning Board of Appeals, as far as explaining how we comply with the zoning requirements under our bylaws for this mixed-use development. This is kind of a blow-up that you saw on the cover sheet, but it really lays out nice because there is a driveway that's in our ownership on that left-hand side that allows the vehicles to access the back of the building. Steve, do you have anything to add to this as far as the courtyard goes, or anything that you want to kind of take it from here, because you're about to get into some of the architectural aspects?
I can kind of jump in, Brian. For the record, Steve DeFuria representing Phoenix Architects. So I'll kind of jump into the architecturals and it'll start to correlate with the site as well on the main floor. But as Brian has mentioned, the building's been out of use for years. I think for us, our goal is to create something architecturally that not only starts to become, fit in with the size and the scale of the neighborhood, but also starts to become a focal point, especially, you start to see it on both sides as you're driving from Main Street. It starts to become that key feature as you start to wrap the corner, especially from the Melrose side. So again, creating almost like a gem piece off of Main Street. So you can start to see what I have right now. I'll walk you through what exists there now in the building and then what we're proposing. So on the existing first floor, you can start to see across Main Street, again, similar to the site plan, Main Street will be at the bottom of the page. Retail that wraps across the front. And then as you start to walk your way towards the back of the building, there starts to be some open workshop area. And then in the back left corner, there is a warehouse that's actually stepped down. That's probably somewhere between 2 feet and 30 inches from the main floor level of the main building. And what that actually starts to do, as Brian had mentioned, is it helps with parking. So now that slab's set down, we have the opportunity to have parking underneath the building, gets us 22 parking spaces. And we're actually starting to peel the building back a little bit. As you can start to see, there's an angled edge on the left corner of the building. In order to get a right-of-way that's 24 feet wide for a fire truck to get back there, we're actually cutting the building in about a little under 17 feet just to allow that right-of-way. And similar to the existing, again, holding retail establishments across the front, we get about 4,400 square feet of retail space. Right now it's broken up into 6 areas. Again, we'll start to work through those as they start to get more redefined. And then as you walk towards the back of the building, that's where the parking garage starts to be. And in order to get parking on both sides of the alley, we're actually adding a spot out by the courtyard area, about 14 and a half feet across the whole way, just to get parking on both sides. Again, trying to get that required number of 20 spaces as close as we can. And with the natural U shape of the building, as you guys can start to see in the center there, it's an open courtyard area. Since it's in the back of the building, we're trying to highlight that entryway so it doesn't feel like it's a backdoor entry for the tenants. So elements like wide staircases, landscape features in the middle will just help to exemplify that. Jumping up to the second floor, all that really exists there now is just open warehouse spaces. You can see in terms of footprint that the front left corner of the building actually is held to a single story. Rest of the building is a mix between 2.5 story structure. So what we're doing to allow for those 16 units is actually taking over that the rest of that footprint. starting to populate with various types of units. Majority of them are one bedroom. We have about 10 one bedrooms, 2 studio one bedrooms across the way, and then in the area in the back that starts to step down, actually introducing 2-bedroom townhouse style units. So what it starts to do is there's an area that is actually located on the 3rd floor. You'll see in the elevation in a minute that it actually works with the scale of the building. But now you can start to see the upper level of those townhouse units. So those have living down below, and then 2 bedrooms up above. And then again, just starting to look at the building from the Main Street perspective. Again, you can start to see the retail's populated existing wise with lots of glass. We really wanted to maintain that, especially in terms of sight lines.
So up top is the existing building today, just to explain,
Yeah.
just to orient. Up top is the existing building, and down below is what's being proposed.
So carrying the glass again on those retail establishments, kind of creating the indoor-outdoor connection with Main Street. You can start to see on the existing elevation, that square structure kind of in the left corner is actually that 3rd floor that you saw on the floor plan. Since it's dropped, it just starts to work with the scale of the building, so you don't have this 3rd story that starts to tower over on Main Street. And then you can see, as Brian mentioned, our proposed front elevation at the bottom. Again, sticking with the scale of what exists there now, trying as best we can to tie it in with the neighborhood. Lots of glass with retail, starting to break it with a thick band that starts to separate the retail and the apartment residential level on the outside. I think it starts to become more apparent more at the 3D streetscape rendering. This, as you can see, is what exists there now, and then we started to actually overlay our building on there. Again, you can just start to see that the scale of the surrounding buildings, trying as best we can to maintain that scale so our building doesn't feel so predominant and overpowering. And you can start to see things like introducing Boston bays, the thick banding, thicker window trim detail, extended overhangs and brackets underneath there, just to start to really highlight that traditional feel of the building. And then we started to explore a couple color options, looking at the buildings that surround it. A lot of the analysis that we discovered with the surrounding buildings falls within the reds, browns, and tans family. So for our building, we wanted to kind of mimic that color scheme with the siding of the building on the residential level. And then offsetting that lighter color with black windows, starting to go with the darker trim, darker siding down at the retail to kind of mix with the black windows. And then you can see the thick gray banding with the signage of the retail establishments, just starting to break the retail and the residential. And then looking at a different scheme, starting to go a little bit more neutral. I think as you start to go further down Main Street towards downtown Melrose, buildings like the Santander building and then the residential unit behind it starts to have some gray tones. So just exploring some darker siding that complements the black windows and then the light gray band. And then starting to flip-flop a little bit with some light colors and dark colors. So going with the light gray siding as a 3rd option, the darker band, as I mentioned, that starts to break up the retail and the residential, and the signage coming across. And also things like gooseneck lighting, starting to introduce that on the building to further exemplify the traditional feel. And that's it.
That's the update on where we are. So it's been a process. We appreciate your patience, because I know it's been a property that you've had your eye on for a while, so thank you for that. And we're looking forward to the process before the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we'll be there in probably about 3 weeks. Happy to answer any questions that you might have, Madam Chair.
Great. Counselor McLean.
Mr. McGrail, just curious, are these rental units or do you see condominium units for the residential?
They don't have to be designated at this point, but the initial plan is for rental units. You know, a lot of times that's driven by the market with what's going on right now, and but that can change. I've had people think they're going to do rental and they do condominium and vice versa. That's correct, right, Andreas? Yeah.
Counselor Dombrowski.
Thank you for the presentation. For those that are watching at home, you're right. It is a building that has a lot of prominence when you're coming from the north or from the south, right? And so would the sides of the building look similar to what people are seeing on the front?
Yeah, so you can start to see it in this rendering here. Kind of that detail starts to wrap. I think once we start to really get into it, we'll start to look at those, like you mentioned, those side conditions. So making sure things like those windows start to carry, if we start to carry those light fixtures as well, because especially on coming from the lakeside going to Melrose, since we're peeling that building back, you're going to see a lot more of it.
Right.
So it'll be our job to make sure that, those elevations don't lack. They tie in with the front of the building.
So it's not like something where people will think of it as just like a front facade has been done, but the sides are like cinder block-esque, you know what I mean? Like just
Correct.
basic in nature.
And you can see from the site plan as well, those Boston bays at the front, we can start to protrude out a little bit, but it gets pretty tight on the side of the buildings.
Sure.
I think we would love to wrap those around, but it's just, since we're so tight, we can't. So again, just incorporating some of those details just to make sure that those elevations aren't forgotten.
So if you're coming from like the Santander, to use your example, coming up Main Street, then you would see, it would have a similar feel all the way around the building.
Correct, yep.
Like, obviously, I know this has to go through ZBA, but just what your intentions are, I guess, And then closer here, where you're saying you're shaving off some of the building, that's the cars coming in and out, so residents are going to be seeing that, so presumably that's going to be presentable.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned, Mr. McGrail, beginning with the ZBA. I don't pretend to understand the whole process that you're going through, but do you have just given what you're looking for with this project, do you have a sense of any kind of ballpark timeline of when people could maybe expect to see, assuming approvals go through, when construction might begin?
I would say the permitting process, and this would be my guess, and I certainly don't want to be presumptuous for the zoning board if they're watching, but my guess would be, from prior experience, anywhere from 4 to 6 months. Because what happens is, sometimes you miss meetings, there's work that has to be done, there's homework assignments, they request architectural changes, they request, I know they're going to want to know what's going on all sides of the building, even the back, which they always want to know, and they'll have their comments, and then we'll have to go to traffic advisory. Traffic advisory might have some questions. We have to work through the envision issues, because there's going to be some changes in that area of Main Street. I think there's going to be a center island and stuff
Right.
that we're going to have to work through and make sure that we work with that. So I would say from start to finish, approximately 6 months for the permitting.
And then once the permitting is squared away, then construction could potentially begin pretty soon thereafter.
Yeah, you're ready to go, right, Andres? Yeah, you're ready to go.
And then where do we stand with the environmental piece? Because I know that was a big issue last time your clients were here. I'd hate to see that become a further holdup in the
Yes,
permitting.
so I
as
spoke
well.
with Andreas about that today, and that's all set.
So that's not an issue any
Yeah,
further now?
it's all done, right? Yeah,
So no delays?
no.
All right. And then from the retail piece of things, one thing I would encourage your clients too to think about is connecting with our community and economic development director. So we have some kind of more of a coordinated approach with that. I'm sure your clients, given their business,
Yeah, so we've,
has connection.
we already have. Erin Kokinda has been very helpful on this process. She has kind of shepherded us along a little bit and has given us some ideas for the retail and what we might be able to do there. So we appreciate her. She's been pushing this gently, I'll say, and trying to push us along in a very good way.
Because I'll say, like,
So-
this area in particular is really screaming for an outdoor component to it. Outdoor seating, coffee house, whatever the case is. A lot of parents find themselves trying to kill time in this area oftentimes. So it would really, I think it would enliven this area in a way. There's a real great potential in the town with the Envision plan, obviously assumes that will be the case, but there's a real opportunity there. So from my perspective, I think a lot of folks, it would be very well received by the town if there was a heavy emphasis on how you incorporate outdoor dining or seating, whatever the case might be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Chines.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I think, the last time this was in front of us on the agenda, I think we all expressed some kind of strong views about the current condition of the building. So it is exciting to see, kind of a plan come together and some real progress here. So I really do appreciate everyone's work on that. Just one quick question, and this is really maybe from my understanding. Is this a renovation of the existing structure? Is this new construction, or is this something in between, depending on what you find when you start tearing down walls?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think it's going to be a renovation, but a lot of demolition that's going to happen. So you want to?
Yeah, I
Talk
think
about that.
our goal would be start to walk through with the structural engineer, just to start to get a feel for what the structure exists there now. I think a big component is we're carving a lot of the building out for the parking. So I think it's going to just be, we're going to just start to weigh what are we really saving at the end of the day. So I think it's up in the air. I think our goal would be to maintain and renovate, but I think we'll get some more answers as we start to walk through further.
Okay. And I'm assuming as part of your planning, and I'm sure the ZBA will ask about this as well, just thinking about construction mitigation. I mean, as you mentioned, it is a really tight site. I mean, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic in that area. Certainly hope that, whatever mitigation plans need to come up with to make sure that that area remains safe when you are under construction is part of the process. you're
Yeah,
following.
with tight projects like this, they will usually require a construction management plan to be put together. They require that, and that's usually done in conjunction with perhaps the chair of the ZBA and then the various administrative staff, police, fire, DPW, to make sure that the sidewalks stay open and are safe. And then they also require an operation and maintenance plan for the long-term maintenance of the building that would be part of the decision in the event it was to get approved.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Dennehy.
Thank you. I think it looks really nice. I
you.
think it's exciting to see it. Did you consider brick for the facade?
So it's funny because we've probably had internally 4 or 5 meetings of the building thus far going through it, and it has come up in conversation, and it just becomes a factor of cost, I think, when you start to think of it at a building scale. And then it starts to get hard, especially once you start to wrap the corners of just where you start to cap the brick. It's kind of a hard material to work with when you start to mix it with clapboard siding. Just how do you do that smooth transition? But it has come up in conversation. And I'm sure the zoning board as well will have an opinion as well, especially with a lot of the surrounding buildings are
Right.
a brick facade. So I'm sure it'll come back up in conversation for sure.
And then I have another question. Is it's retail space, 4,400 square feet, and then 6 retail spaces. And I don't know anything about retail spaces. Is that too limiting? Is it going to be limiting in terms of the types of businesses that can go in there?
So I think the 6 spaces right now, I think we kind of have as a placeholder. I think roughly each spot is about 700, 750 square feet. 1,000 I know is usually a max, especially when you're starting to think of getting people in there. But it might be a situation where, depending on who we have coming in, we might go down to 5 and give one business, a bigger retail spot. So I think those kind of things are still in progress, but 100% understood.
Okay. So then how long does construction, I know the permitting 4 to 6 months, and then once you start construction, how long does that usually take from beginning to end to
Scott,
ready to
is that,
open?
something you can? You want to come up here for a second? You need the microphone, Scott. This is Scott Fitzpatrick, who's our construction consultant.
Good evening. How are you? Depending on the extent of the structural work, which we really won't know till the engineer goes through, we're probably in the year timeline from start to finish. We have started looking at some early work that we can be doing to get the engineer in there. We've already done the asbestos survey of the property. I've had a couple of demolition companies in there looking at gutting the inside of the building so the engineer will be able to do his work. I haven't approached the building commissioner about that yet, but so we're putting a plan together to get some early stuff done to try to eliminate the waiting time once the ZBA or the permitting authority grants permission for the project if they do.
That's great. And then what's the cycle of when businesses would be able to start negotiations and saying, we might want to go in there and build out our space?
That's, I think, more of an Andreas question. He does a lot of the leasing, but typically once the spaces start to get defined is when we've had good luck in the past. We just completed a 10,000 square foot building in Malden at the old Papagino site. Andreas owns it, and we redeveloped it. And it was when the envelope started to, take shape is when we started showing the property. And that also allowed for the flexibility, we had, one tenant take 2 spaces, and it's really a good time to start.
Okay, good. And the parking spaces, 22 parking spaces, is that going to be all residential parking spaces? Thank you.
You don't want to talk about parking spots?
Yeah, those would be residential parking
Residential
spaces, yeah.
parking.
And then we will be looking for, as is typical downtown, the retail that was there historically didn't have any parking.
Yeah,
So there's not much downtown that does.
yeah.
So that's one of the application requests that we have before the Board of Appeals,
Okay.
for relief for the parking as it relates to the retail service establishment, indoor restaurant. And there's a chance, as Steve and Scott said, that some of those areas of the commercial will be combined.
Mm.
Maybe Molise will come back to town.
That's great. So, and then for outdoor seating, we could do something outdoors.
There's not a lot of room for that. We'll look at it.
Well, I was
We-
just wondering
you know,
if you could move the sidewalk out and then change the parking, or does that take away parking spots?
Yeah, that's going to impact.
That'll take away
Yeah, that's
parking.
going to impact the public way.
Yeah,
So we might be able to do some, outdoor dining, sidewalk dining.
yeah,
The town has a process for that.
Yeah.
It's permittable.
Yeah.
If we go through the process. So there might be an opportunity for that.
Counselor Vincent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple quick questions about the affordable housing.
Mhm.
When you were going through the slides, I saw one that said ADA. Is that an Disabilities Act unit? What did the ADA stand for?
Yes, you can take that, Steve. That's
Yeah.
here.
Bounce back to the plan.
And I assume you picked to put it in a certain location for that reason.
Yeah. So there has to be one. I think it's either 2 or 5% of the units have to be ADA compliant. When it just do the math out of the 16 units, it becomes one unit. So we work through just with the design of the building. There starts to be certain requirements with 5-foot radiuses inside the unit in the bathroom,
Okay.
door widths, those kind of things. So it definitely starts to push the envelope in terms of the square footage of the unit. But again, providing that just with the requirement, and then obviously the elevator will help as well with accessibility.
And then the other 2 affordable units, because it's 3 out of 16, do you make a determination at some point in time whether they're going to be 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom?
Usually what the zoning board will do is require proportion.
Okay.
So, that's usually that's what they've done historically. So I don't know what the unit breakdown is, but, if you have, for example, 20 units and there's 10 2-bedrooms and 10 1-bedroom, they're going to want 2 2-bedrooms and 2 1-bedrooms as affordable.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to go to Counselor Smith Galvin first. Thank you.
Thank you. This is really exciting, so thank you for bringing this to us. I was just looking back at the Envision Wakefield plan that we've all spent a lot of time on, and it looks, I don't know how this pertains exactly to you, but I think if we are doing the work here, it looks like those were planned to go to parallel parking spaces in that area and really narrow up that road. So I guess I'm just suggesting to Steve and our team that, as this work is going, it would be really nice to kind of bring this vision that we've had from Envision Wakefield to the extent that we can. I know there's a lot of funding involved there, but I would really try to rely on that vision as you are kind of building this out.
Yep. Thanks for pointing that out.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think rightly so we mentioned Envision. We've got a lot of things going on that we've talked about. So the master plan, the vision statement, and they all talk about more walkability and public outdoor spaces. And so I think that's really important that Julie mentioned that. And I'm sure Steve and his team will be thinking about that, but it's something for you to think about too, is that Counselor Dombrowski is right. Like, people are looking, they're searching for places to sit outside, coffee shops where they can come and go that are family friendly. We've been, it's spring, so we're officially going to start talking about parklets again, and is that something that using sidewalks that we can do? So just something to think about. I see my fellow counselors have their hands up. I just want to say one thing before I go to everyone else. So we invited you here after the last July 4th because we did not like looking at your previous slide. And so just wondering about the wrapping that'll happen, so we don't have to spend another 4th of July looking at the old building.
Yeah, the town administrator has probably called me about 20 times on that.
Okay, only 20.
Yeah.
because I'm-
be well prepped.
Maybe 21. Yeah. So there's no issue with putting some, some facade, with a sign. We just don't want to put anything coming soon because it might be a little presumptuous for the
That's-
zoning board. We don't want to like have them see it coming soon before they permit a project. So
Yeah, I would maybe work with Steve to just get whatever the wording is, but the sooner that can go up, I think it'll just, because again,
Yeah.
it's been since last July.
we
that
can
would
probably
be
work with the
great.
sign company and figure something out. We'll work with Steve and maybe Aaron. Maybe a good message.
That
we
would be
can put.
great. That would, I think, help a lot of people in town. Counselor McLean and then Counselor Dabrowski.
Just a quick question, Attorney McGrail, did you have a rendering of the courtyard, or is that premature?
Do you want to go back to that and maybe talk a little bit about it? It's not, we don't have a rendering, Mr. McLean, but we do have an idea, so maybe Steve can maybe give a little detail.
Yeah, I think we're envisioning it as like a private outdoor space for the tenants. I know there's been the talk about kind of expanding the retail out. Again, we don't know yet the logistics of it, but that could be an opportunity there as well. So again, I think some nice landscape, maybe some benches out there, just a spot for the tenants to sit as well. And I forgot to mention as well, on the second floor, there is actually a roof deck amenity as well that we proposed for the tenants, again, overlooking that courtyard. So just, again, another amenity for people that are staying there and renting.
Thank you.
Counselor Dabrowski?
I would just echo the issue, the opportunities that Envision provides, because that is really a very dangerous turn as you get towards the hardware store. So all of the consultants have recommended that it become painted parallel in front of there, which would allow for a lot more flexibility in terms of outdoor spaces. So even at this early stage of your design, being mindful of that, I think you could be a lot more creative. And obviously the town has flexibility in terms of, obviously working with you to make sure that design works for everyone. But I think as you're talking to ZBA too, making them aware of that as well. And we know that we'll lose some angled as a result of that, and we're looking at other opportunities to be able to establish public parking elsewhere too. So that becomes problematic. That was always meant to be part of the plan, that we'd have it'd be wider sidewalks, less parking in that particular area from a safety perspective. But I think it provides a real opportunity to be able to go in a lot of different directions with the outdoor component, which I think is incredibly important. You're across from the Marical, you're across from the junior high.
Yeah.
You've got like a dance studio. You've got a lot of parents, a lot of kids. There's just a lot of opportunity there that I think is not realized right now.
Okay. Yeah, the Department of Public Works and specifically Bill Renault in the engineering department, when we did the Santander Bank, the new bank, they got right, what will happen. The process is we've applied to the zoning board, so they send a comment request out to all the administrative staff. So usually we'll end up with a memo on projects like this of about 4 pages from DPW and engineering. And when the Santander Bank was done, the big thing on that was, their comment was, make sure it's in sync with Envision and the rail to trail, because I was right. And so we worked really hard with them to make sure that the sidewalks that we put in, we didn't have to do them twice, so Bill Renault's great about that. And I'm sure he's going to do the same thing here, and we'll reach out to him and make sure that we're in sync with everything. So,
Any other comments, questions? Steve, anything to add?
No, thank you. Thank you for coming in, Mr. McGrail. And
Yeah.
Mr. McGrail made, promises at the last meeting, and he did keep them to come in here, so.
No, we really appreciate it, and we understand, we heard you, this is ZBA, you're in front of the ZBA, but we really appreciate you giving us the overview and having this open dialogue, so thank you. Really looking forward to that wrapping, so, and getting through the process, but thank the entire team for coming today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you for the time.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on, item number 7, fiscal year 2024 budget. Item A, budget 40, Medicare.
So,
Thank you very much.
as Kevin gets settled, Madam Chair, just want to say that we're coming to the end of our budget odyssey. Thank you. I think that there's only a couple more budgets that will be in front of the town council. And I think that they're going to come in, I think where, well, the one that I have, where I expected them. But where we are today is that everything that's in front of you, including tonight, I got to give my department heads a lot of credit, give Kevin all the credit in the world. So in front of you, from all the budgets that we've had, including big things like insurance and retirement, they are coming in at a 2.79% over last fiscal year. That does not include a couple of outstanding contracts in there, but I think if we were to fold them in an area that I thought would be reasonable, we'd be at around 3.8%. So that's not bad given the atmosphere that we're in, and the cost going factors. I want to thank Kevin. He's done a fabulous job, as he always does, and now we can go on and talk about the budgets in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Madam Chair, Town Council members. First budget up tonight is the Medicare budget. We're requesting an increase to this budget of $87,051 over the current fiscal year. This budget is used to pay the town's portion of the Medicare tax. This is a salary-based tax for employees hired after 1986, the tax rate of 1.45%. The total budget request is $961,331. I just want to take a second. This is a budget that we've been chasing the past couple of years. Fiscal 21, we had to do a reserve fund transfer, $10,000. In fiscal 22, we had to do a reserve fund of $20,000. I'm anticipating we're going to have to do a reserve fund at the end of this year of approximately $30,000. So this budget, the percentage increase was pretty high. It's about a 9% increase. But when you encompass the reserve fund transfers and the salary increases this year, we're looking to right-size this. So that's why the big ask for this year.
Thank you. Any questions? Counselor Dombrowski?
Just so I'm clear on this, Mr. Gill. So I know that Medicare is 1.45.
Yes.
Right. Just time
Correct.
on all income. So why would we not in a given year be able to do pretty close to exact what the calculation would be, because we have all of the income or all the salaries, right? That are, I know people can come and go, but
Right.
I think if someone left, that we might be a period where it might be a little less, but we wouldn't be hiring on anyone else that would be higher than we've budgeted, right?
Right, but projecting out this budget, I think what happens is when we come up with this budget in March, it's really not till the end of June that we start doing reserve funds. So I don't think we've calculated that request from prior years into this current year's budget. So that's why this increase is so high. We're looking to right-size it, so next year we don't have to come back and ask for a reserve fund transfer. Also, another big factor in this was the school budget. I think last year there were 13 new FTEs in that budget. Big salary increase that I don't think was calculated into the current year's budget. So there's a couple different factors going in there.
On the school side, do we get a precise enough accounting of the salaries to be able to do that kind of math in a meaningful way? Because I would think that that's an important, because when I think of salary, town-wide, it's really school that's driving that more than town hall is.
It is a big portion of the budget. And with this budget here, I've calculated in the school request for this increase, where I have their draft budget and I have their projected salary increases. So I've looked at all the budgets for fiscal 24, calculated out that salary increase, and that's incorporated in this budget currently.
And do you get those salaries broken down by position from the school side? Because like town, I can see each of the positions. Like, do you get that same level of detail from the school side?
No, I just get what's in their budget.
Like one big number, or?
Pretty much.
So why are we doing it? Why do we do it so much with much more precision on the town side than the school side?
must be past practice. That's what we've been dealing with the past couple of years, past several years, with regards to the school budget, that they break it out by location, some positions, but it's not as detailed as what you see on the town side.
Because it just, I mean, because if that's one of the two factors, and if that's driving this to like almost a 10%, that seems a little bit, that's a pretty significant change, because I don't know that our salaries have gone up, but town side salaries haven't gone up commensurate with that.
A portion of that has to do with the current year and the reserve fund transfer that we're going to ask for at the end of this year, and then the salary increases for fiscal '24. So I think those two items coupled together bring it up to that high 9% increase.
Is that something we can get going forward?
I can jump in. There is another factor here that, remember that when you see all of the town side budgets, and I hate that town side, school side.
No, I know.
But when you look at our budgets, you know, we give you basically the exact number of employees and what they are, right? You can go each department, you can look by them. We do not have the authority to move things between line items. So I can't say, hey, we're gonna, you know, we've decided we're gonna hire 10 more people in DPW, for instance, and move it over from somewhere else, which would increase your salary, increase the cost here. That in the school department, they have the ability to move between line items. So we might think that the salary going into the year was X, it could be X plus, and that's within their purview to do that. So it's hard for us to plan for that. So we did this year, we took the, you know, again, it happened last year, and I said and Kevin and I talked about it, let's just take what they're putting in for the entire salary amount, and let's try that. And, you know, I know that there could be movement this year, is fiscal year '24 as well, and we may have to come for reserve fund again. But we don't have the control over that. You know, within that entire budget of 50 million, you know, I see Councilor Danny was shaking her head, former school can remember, they can move to, you know, from what was a, you know, instead of spending money on supplies, spend on salaries, and let's say that 100,000 now means that we have a Medicare issue.
It stands out to me because we talk about the school budget, people think about the school budget, but the school budget also includes, in addition to school budget, we also have the benefit side of things. So
Right.
This is precisely what we're talking about, like healthcare and
Right.
pension, whatever else, you know, we're talking about. But it seems odd that we would have this kind of fluctuation because Medicare has been 1.45% for as long as I've been employed, you know, and so I don't like the fact that we have these kind of increases. So I would like, Steve, can we get more specificity from the school on that?
We have
in the same way?
requested a Excel spreadsheet like you get for us.
It just seems like that's
I've requested that.
I think just transparently, I think that's probably a better way to do it. Understanding they have a little more flexibility than we do, I get that, but I don't think it changes the fundamentals.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's also an opportunity at our tri-board meeting in October, if they have done those changes after we voted, of maybe that becomes part of their presentation of so that we're all aware of, oh, we changed it. So maybe we just make that part of, you know, October 6 months, not 6 months, but it's a little bit in that they'll know a little bit better. So maybe we just make that a part. Councilor Danahy.
That's a great idea. Steve, am I right or am I wrong? But when I was on finance committee, I thought that when the school committee budget came to us, that everything was detailed and we had a listing.
It was more detailed on salaries than it is.
Yeah, I thought it had
Yes.
every
Yes.
employee.
In the book, at least the book that they gave us, it didn't necessarily have every employee like we get, but it did have, you know, kind of by school, by position, you know, here's sort of the salary. So it's not like it's just, you know, a number of $35 million.
Right.
Actually, years ago, you got everything.
We got everybody, yeah. I think we
In the-
used
in
to
the
get
budget book,
everybody.
yeah. You're absolutely right.
I am, right? See, my memory.
Any other questions or comments on the Medicare budget? Do I have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, move to approve the fiscal year 2024 Medicare budget as presented.
Second.
Great, any further discussion? All in favor? 7-0 unanimous, thank you. Budget 46, group health insurance.
Yes, the group health insurance budget, we have Amy Forziati online with us tonight. Amy does a lot of work on the group insurance budget, along with Karen Doucette. We are requesting an increase of $507,660
$96 over the current fiscal year. On average, health insurance costs are increasing approximately 5.7% next year. The tax levy portion of the budget is being increased $341,175. The enterprise portion of the budget was increased $166,521. The personal services line increased $7,393. These are for contractual and negotiated increases. This budget also funds the town's OPEB trust fund. We put in $1.4 million each year. The current balance in the account is $27,820,000. The total budget request for fiscal '24 is $15,713,016, with $13,292,060 coming from tax levy, and $497,513 from the water enterprise, $342,960 from the sewer enterprise, and $1,580,483 from the municipal light department. With that, if there are any specific questions, we have Amy online, or I can answer them.
If I can just add a couple comments.
Sure.
I think that I'm actually very pleased with this budget, considering what I was hearing coming out of the state and the GIC, and you hear 5.7% increase on the average plan. I'm saying, oh boy, this is going to be a tough one to go through. But to come in at 2.6% on the tax levy and 3.3 overall, 3.34 overall, is really a testament to the great work that our Human Resources Department, Amy and Karen do, and almost meet with our employees person by person. And I'm not being facetious. Within the GIC family, there are a lot of plans that you can look at. And the employee can save money by going to a plan that gives them the same health care, the same group of doctors and hospitals at a cheaper rate for them and a cheaper rate for us. And Amy and Karen have done a great job of working with and moving people to different health plans, collaboratively. And that's worked really, really well. The other two items that have worked really well is our opt-out plan. We started that. When did we start that, Amy? The opt-out plan? Long time ago? She's not unmuted.
We can't hear
She's,
you.
she's never this shy when she's in the office, so I'm really kind of mute button.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. January of 2012.
January of 2012, and we have avoided a great number of fees since then. And this is kind of a tricky way to go through it, but we have been contacted by other communities that have kind of followed our model. And last year, fiscal year 22, we probably saved about $600,000 in people opting out. Fiscal year 23, we think we're going to end up avoiding $645,000.
And what does that mean, opt out? So they do not take our
If they've been
benefits?
on our plan for a year,
Uh-huh.
or a year or 6 months, I forget. 6 months.
Six.
Then they maybe their spouses, they have to have insurance.
Okay.
So maybe their spouse's plan is better,
Okay.
and there are some that are better. We'll actually pay you to opt out on our plan, and it's what is it per month? It's
$125 per individual or $250 per family.
Right.
So when you look at the cost to the town, a family plan for the town costs us anywhere from $1,500 to $1,900 a month. So to opt out and pay somebody $250, they get $3,000 for the year, and they're not paying the premiums. It's quite a bump.
That's great. That's
Right.
really good.
And and this goes on, throughout the year. We expect this budget to return $800,000, Kevin? We think to the-
Approximately $800,000.
Approximately $800,000 to the general fund at the end of the year. Part of it is moving people to plans. Part of it is that every year we plan that maybe we're going to have 10 or 12 plans, because we don't know if people are going to come on. We have to have the money available. And to be a little bit sad, we have had a number of retirees pass away this year, and of course, there's no more health insurance, so we've already budgeted for that. So all in all, this is a really good budget. A couple of things I think the council needs to keep in their mind, and things that we're talking about this as a kind of a contingent liability. You know, out of our active employees, 257 are not enrolled in our health plan. That's a high number we got to think about in the future. Part of that is that a lot of our new employees that are under 26 are still on their parents' plan.
Oh, yeah.
So they're opting out for zero plan, right? So that is something that we talk about and talking about in my fellow managers, that this is something we have to think about continuously in the future. But I'm really very pleased with the work that we've done here. We went to GIC years ago, and that was a tough slog to get there. We had to negotiate that through all of the unions, through the employee committee. And I actually had to call in the town council, or board of selectmen at the time, I think it was July 5th or 6th, to have a special meeting to vote to go in, because the state just opened the window and I wanted to jump us in on that quick. So they weren't too thrilled with me coming in here, but it was it was before Zoom, so they had to actually be here to participate in the meeting. But I'm very, very pleased with how our staff has worked on this. So thank you. I didn't need to talk so much, but
That's
I
okay.
think it's
And
important.
of those 57,
Yeah.
Amy, you check that they do have health insurance, right? In Massachusetts, they have.
Oh, they have to,
So
absolutely,
we,
yeah.
we verify that they have some sort of insurance.
We do not verify if they opt out when they come into us. But yes, in the state of Massachusetts, you're required to have health insurance. So
When they opt out, we
presumably-
require that they show us.
when they
Okay,
opt
when they
out,
opt
they
out.
do it.
Right,
Right.
right. Okay. Counselor Chines.
Thank you. I want to say, I think this budget has been one of the greatest sort of long-term success stories in all of our budgets. And, you know, speaking as someone who works in the healthcare field, who worked on the insurance side for a long time, first of all, to see, you know, increases year over year that are in the low single digits is really extraordinary. I mean, this was a year where, you know, Steve, honestly, and Kevin, if you came to us and said, you know, the increase was, you know, 8 to 10, given, you know, what I'm hearing in the market, you know, the fact that, you know, we feared it might be 5 and it's actually a lot lower is really extraordinary. I also think, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but are we still below our pre-GIC spend on health
I
insurance?
think including
Or
ARPA,
we- or at least
I
getting
meant to
close.
look at it today, but probably
Yeah.
about the same, but that includes ARPA.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
so-
been
yeah.
10 plus years. And the fact that, you know, effectively we've had a...
Including OPEB.
Yeah,
Including
effectively,
OPEB.
we've had a 0% trend. I
Yeah.
mean, this is
Yeah.
really an incredible success story, and I think a testament, you know, to your vision, Steve, and to the
team.
vision of the Board of Selectmen at the time for making this move, and also a testament to kind of the willingness of our unions to go along with this. I mean, this is extraordinary.
I mean, we meet with the Public Employee Committee at least quarterly, and more during open enrollment and things like that. And it is this is made up of every union in town, including the teachers and the paraprofessionals and people at the schools. It is really a great group that problem solves, and we talk about what we're trying to do, because it benefits everybody.
Yeah.
You know, it even benefits some people to move from an 80% plan that we pay 80, they pay 20, to a 75-25 plan. We've had some movement there too, and it benefits them and us. So it's really, I'm very pleased with how this has rolled out over the last few years, and I keep waiting for that big 10% year
You
that's
know,
gonna come in.
I do too, and at least in, you know, 6 years of doing these budgets between FinCom and
Yeah.
Town Council, 6 or 7, it hasn't happened yet, which is great.
You know, and the GIC hasn't made it easy. They've combined plans and made it a lot tougher for.
Yeah. So that was actually a question that I had, Amy, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well. You know, given that, you know, there have been some plan changes and consolidations, you know, do you see any kind of new challenges ahead when it comes to working with employees around plan selection, or any headwinds maybe that we didn't have last year that, you know, as we look at the plan contingent for the coming year, seem challenging?
Well, coming into this open enrollment, Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts merged to create .32, and our Tufts products are going away. The Tufts Navigator plan was wildly popular in town, I think mostly because everybody knows that name. And I don't want to be down on the Tufts plan, but it was not hardly our best option. So this year, it's a wonderful opportunity for us to get in front of those folks who have been diehard Tufts fans, to maybe show them that there are more options with more benefit-rich features at a lower cost. So no, this year, it's great for us.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the work that you do. I mean, like I said, this is a great success story and something that I think we can be really proud of.
Counselor
Thank
Denny?
you.
Yeah, and Amy, I just want to say, I think it's really great that you're meeting with employees and providing them that, that kind of assistance, because I think that isn't necessarily typical in human resources, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference to the employees, making it better for the employees, and also ultimately saving money for the town. So thank you for that. And the other thing is, Steve, is that when you introduced the GIC, that was probably one of the greatest achievements. That was unbelievable. It really is a success story. And it's been great, and there haven't been any problems with it. So congratulations.
Thank you, but
on
the big part of that is the state legislature did lower the threshold.
Yeah.
Which allowed us to get in.
Yeah.
So we can thank Bob DeLeo for that.
No, but it was a big, I mean, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was a big,
Yeah.
that was really, I think that a lot of people were a little bit concerned
Mm-hmm.
about what it meant. It was a leap of faith and showed the
Right.
union's trust in you, so.
Thank you.
Counselor Vincent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin, I've been impressed with you and your staff working with you on the warrants for the last 11 months.
Thank you.
But I was even more impressed with working with you on the budget process. My first time going through that, you were very patient in answering any questions I had, whether it was email, coming into your office. And you made it very easy and understandable, and you were very patient, so I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Counselor Dombrowski?
I'll just say, it's been a few years, I feel like I've been through this with Amy at the helm, and I always knew she was a shark with her budgeting, but I see now she's reminding us with her poster in the back. that
Oh.
John's poster. Very subtle there. Subconscious, I like it.
I couldn't preview the video, so I wasn't aware of
That's great.
my husband's favorite movie.
Any other questions on the group health insurance budget? Do I have a motion?
Yes, I enthusiastically move to approve the group health insurance budget as proposed for fiscal year 2024.
Second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. 7-0. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I
Thanks,
get
Thank you,
excited
Amy.
about things like this,
And
Steve.
item number C, cable television.
Yes, the cable TV public access enterprise budget. I work very closely with, you all know Ryan Boyd and Paul Norman on this budget. We're recommending this budget be decreased $47,629 over the current fiscal year. This budget is funded from receipts from our cable provider. We have 3, Verizon, Comcast, and RCN. And we also have a town agreement with the town and WCAT to provide these services. This budget is based on both prior and current year estimates of revenue and is apportioned by the town's agreements. Revenues overall have been trending down year over the year. It's about a 2% decrease. So that's what we projected in this budget. Also on the capital side, the reason for the decrease there of $37,500, we received 2 capital payments in fiscal '23. We received the fiscal '22 and the fiscal '23 payment in '23. Next year, we only anticipate one, being the FY '24 capital payment. On the personal services side, for fiscal '24, the amount is $149,537, and this is used for salaries at Wakefield High School for 2 teachers in their media department. And on the contractual services side, The amount is $346,839, and this is used for payments to WCAT. WCAT is a 503C, which is set up to provide the PEG services to the town of Wakefield. The total budget request for fiscal '24 is $558,876.
Thank you. Yeah, Ryan, do you want to come up and chat?
I can take a moment. I'd like to take a moment to address the town council regarding the continued funding decrease seen by the town's cable providers, RCN, Verizon, and Comcast. For the last 3 years, I've sat down with councilors and Mr. Mayo to discuss our funding needs for maintaining the services we provide to the town and to the community. The general feedback received was to come back to you when the problem reached a breaking point. Well, for the first time this year, our proposed budget income from the town's cable providers is less than our proposed budget necessary to maintain current operations. For years, we've run our station on the tightest of budgets. 80% of our current budget is designated payroll. We don't even offer health insurance to our employees because it's too cost prohibitive. We continuously look for ways to cut our costs, including the possibility of salary freezes and/or staff reductions. We continue to fundraise and explore grant opportunities. We've taken on paid productions. We've created a new sponsorship program, but apart from the savings bank, which has generously supported us, we've been unable to attract new sponsors in this challenging economic environment. We've established a subcommittee of our board of directors to investigate new funding alternatives. And we're grateful for the partnerships that we've gained. And we're also very grateful for the ARPA funds provided by the town council. But these efforts have not been enough to sustain a break-even budget for us. We don't have the staff necessary to consistently fundraise and to continue to do our jobs. Without alternative funding sources, WCAT will cease to exist. And so will our ability to fill the needs of the community. We are everywhere in this town. Live streaming sports, graduations, 4th of July, town events, and critical government meetings. We train students who want to gain experience in a working production environment. We work with various town departments, and we rarely say no to anyone, only when we must. An inability to meet our budget needs will result in a reduction in staff, which means a reduced ability to perform these services for the community. And I'm looking to you as community leaders to help us address this funding issue. Based upon the proposed budget from the Cable Enterprise FY24 budget and a 4% increase in expenses, we are looking at an FY24 budget loss of $73,000. And I'm here to ask you if you will please create a committee to help us find a solution to the cable funding issue, because we really, really need your help.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Steve, do you want to say anything?
I've met with Ryan and his crew a number of times, and I think one thing that is important is that I think the entire town council is supporting the streaming bill at the legislature, which is certainly there. I think we've spoken to all of our delegation and tried to move that forward. That'll certainly be a help. But I think there are other areas that we should look at regarding, I'm going to say advertising for lack of a better word. I'm going to say advertising, getting sponsors and things like that. And I think that a committee is a good idea, and maybe, Madam Chair, at the next meeting, you can think about it and we can work together. We work together now, but would be great to get some other input as well.
Councillor Chines?
Thank you, and thank you, Ryan, for the presentation as well. I do think a committee is a good idea. I mean, I think that one of the things I know I've mentioned previously that, you know, we really haven't kind of put as much thought to, I think, as we could is, you know, what is the value of the services that, you know, for example, we as a town government are receiving from WCAT? I mean, you know, this, you know, broadcasting all of these meetings, hosting us, requires resources. It's not just, you know, kind of throwing a video online from our meetings. It's the same thing for the school committee, town meeting, and we could go on and on. And so I do think the time is right to look at, you know, what our responsibilities are as a town for maintaining some of our critical government functions, including, again, what we're doing here today. I think if CAT ceased to exist, we would be spending money for these broadcasts to happen in another form. And so I think it's something that we've got to, you know, put some thought to and perhaps come up with a strategy, a formula, a methodology for making sure that, you know, where we as a community are paying sort of our fair share for the services we're receiving.
Councilor Smith Galvin.
We still have, do we still have a cable committee formed?
We do.
I
don't think it's very well staffed.
I don't think, yeah, I don't know where it stands,
Yeah.
but it's always kind of, and I used to be on the board of WCAT, and we know that this has been coming for a long time. So I don't know whether there's any way to kind of utilize that, but we should remember that we do have a structure set up, and if there's any value to that resource, we should rely on them as well as a resource. But I agree, I think we need a committee to talk about this.
Yeah, so we just had our volunteer event, and I looked quickly at the sheet, and I believe it's a 3-member committee that has 1 committee member right now. So that is something that we had in place.
I
That
believe we're soliciting appointees for it right now, too.
Are we, Sherry? Yep, we're soliciting too.
Yeah, so next meeting, there'll be a proposal for 2 additional members to that committee, so that'll be a total of 3.
Thank you.
Let's put them to work, you know?
Yeah. Councilor Dennehy.
No, I agree. I think that's a really good idea. 'Cause can we renegotiate the contracts that we have with the cable companies to pay, you know, to, we have,
Yeah. I think the problem is that there's less people
I
that
know.
are getting cable.
I know, but I'm thinking
Yeah.
like, I know, but I'm thinking if we can leverage them,
Yeah.
that they have to pay more somehow
I
in a
think it was-
different way. It's really unfortunate, and does anybody have any updates on the streaming bill and what's happening with that?
No,
No?
I don't.
Yeah,
I mean, I can tell you that they've been reintroduced. Currently, H74 and S34. The House bill has 55 co-sponsors currently, and the Senate has 63 co-sponsors.
mhm.
Probably not enough at this point, but
Yeah, it's concerning. I mean, I'm very sorry that you don't offer health insurance. I mean,
As am
that
I.
was shocking to me to hear that.
yeah, the team deserves to have an option. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, we've, you know, just and not to harp on it too badly, but you know, we've tried to cut costs everywhere. We've given up our garage space for our truck because, you know, we can save $1,200 a year, $2,400 a year, whatever it was.
Mhm.
You know, just things we're trying to
Mhm.
get rid of and cut and not have the expenses for, just to try to maintain.
Mhm.
And the reality is, every single year, it continues to go down. And, you know, it's not anyone's fault, you know, individually. It's just the reality of the situation. And we are living in an archaic sort of, the way it's funded is outdated at this point.
Right.
And federally, it hasn't been updated, and it seems doubtful it will be. And so, something's got to give somewhere.
Well, I also wonder if there's any opportunities, like rather than saying, oh, we can go to our delegation and get support, but all of the communities, all of these communities, the town councils and the city councils kind of joining together to really put pressure on the entire legislature to move the streaming bill forward. Because that seems to be essentially the issue, is the funding, is the funding model, and everybody knows that it's only gonna get worse.
Yeah, I mean, you know, our voices only ring so loudly.
Mhm.
And stations and station managers and everyone is trying. And we're trying to talk to our councils and our administrators to continue the fight as well. And, you know, I think you get enough people, you can move the dial. But we need you. We need everybody to try to help with this and to try to push it, because we're going up against high-priced streaming lawyers that do not want
Mhm.
these things to happen. So it's not a very even fight, I would say, but we're trying.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The cable committee, I feel like hasn't been all that robust for a long time, but I also think the charge of that committee is probably not quite as dynamic as we were looking for here now. Because I think about what WCAT does, and I consume more of WCAT online, and you've done an excellent job of being able to pivot and recalibrate, to how what viewing habits are like. So I don't know if it's a matter of kind of reconstituting that committee in a different way than we currently have, because I'd be curious to see what the charge of that committee really is, and I don't think it's probably aligns with where we need it to be. Maybe we need to expand it to 5 versus 3. I don't know. Maybe we need to get some sort of a real financial awareness component to it, and be looking for that and trying to engage people who might apply for it. But we're gonna have this discussion every year. It's not gonna get better. Every year we're going to see these numbers go down. And I think, Councilor Dennehy, to your point, I recall, Mr. Mullen, I think was it Verizon that we had a contract with recently, and the out clauses that they had, I feel like in it, we didn't have a great bargaining position with them. I feel like we did as well as we could, but it's not like it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, they wanted to make sure the door was open and their hat was in their hand.
Right, right.
They couldn't wait to get out.
And when you have someone on the other side of the table like that, there's not a whole lot you can try to shake them down for. And I think I think those negotiations are going to continue to get harder, and the bargaining position is going to get weaker and weaker as we go along. But I don't know. I mean, and maybe it's not just the streaming bill. Maybe it's a matter of funding at the state level and looking at it that way. We don't necessarily have to. We don't need funding from a bill in order to make it happen. We need to be able to have this as a priority. And I also don't know to what extent we can look, Steve, because there is overlap with the schools. Is there some sort of efficiency we can realize there from that significant budget that would go towards this, because there is overlap?
I think that is certainly a good point of discussion, frankly.
Because I think there's a serious educational component to what's going on here, and I think that budget could absorb this in a way that a lot of other budgets couldn't.
There used to be a very robust use of WCAT by students, and I don't think we see that today.
It's not as robust as it once was, but we are actively working with students and trying to bring as many in as we can. Yes.
Well, we also have I feel like a program, or at least a class or something, right? In the high school, but they have their own studio or something.
Yes,
right?
yes. The high school has their own television production department.
There's just something about it that seems like I feel like we're doing two very similar functions. And I don't know. I feel like that's well funded for what it's able to provide, but I think this reach is potentially far more significant if we can incorporate the students into it, or find a way to with better synergies than we have currently. Because it seems odd that I don't hear them coming to us out of concern for their budget in that regard. But I hear you guys coming out of concern, and we have to do something better that way. I don't.
Yeah,
I think it can be figured out.
It's a matter of, well, I can't speak for anything that they're doing over there, really. But
that's part of the problem. You should be able to. There should be more hand in glove than you guys have.
Yeah,
now.
no, yeah.
We're
lucky enough to have folks that have brought students in for us, and students bring more students, and it's great. So we have folks coming in for these productions, for all of that, who want to learn about live production, or about lighting specifically, or about podcasting, or whatever it might be. So we provide that for the students. And we even, aside from Wakefield Memorial, the tech up the road, we have a group of students coming down who podcast here, and they want to learn all about it and get their voices out as well. So we are certainly eager to have anyone come in who wants to be here, especially students. And we are doing what we can to bring them in here and to try to provide an education for the ones who want to learn what we're doing and how we do things, because they're different programs. They have what they do over there, and it is different from what we do. It's not live broadcast television, and I think there's a value to both, very much so, because what they do is again, it's just different than what we do.
And does Northeast currently pay anything
No.
to WCAT?
No.
So that's like I think another way of thinking about it, because that's a 12-year community budget, so they are in a better position.
That's more of an after-school program than anything else. It's
Yeah.
not really part of their educational plan.
But there's probably still a way we could try to make it work, so that it provides that component without further taxing you guys, provides a benefit to you, and also provides some sort of revenue coming in.
Counselor, I'll take the money wherever I can get it.
Right.
Counselor McLean?
I'm just curious, are our local representatives co-sponsors of the bills that you mentioned?
They are.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Counselor Chines?
Just one other comment. I think we all sort of enjoy, and we all still enjoy a lot of the, the sporting events that you guys film as well. And I guess maybe this is a plea for some of the boosters clubs and other organizations that support those teams to think about the plight that you guys are in. I mean, when our football team went to the Super Bowl, I mean, a lot of us watched coverage, and I think it still repeats on some of the stations, public access stations that we have.
In fact, Tom's watching.
Tom is busy with that now. But I think, I just sort of say that as kind of a call to the community to recognize that, part of the way we support, some of our athletic events and so forth is through the broadcast process and some of the work that you guys do. And so I hope that maybe inspires some support
and,
as well.
And we've sold, for lack of better terms, ad space for, underwriting for football games and things like that. But you're talking $500, which is great. It's wonderful, but it's a far cry from what we need overall.
The other thing that I did mention to Ryan, we met last week, some of his board members, is that there are some of us that are on committees at the MMA, and the MMA is a good sounding board of these things, and it is a lobbying, they have a lobbying presence. I know that, and I said we'd love to have whoever they're kind of, because everyone's in the same boat, right?
Yep.
Melrose is in the same boat. Everyone's in the same boat. Their whole, whoever's handling their lobbying for them to come before the MMA, at least my committee, and I know that Jonathan, you're on a committee, so this is an important issue that, hey, getting MMA behind would be a great boon.
And we've been talking with them, we've been working with them, trying to get them interested, excited.
And that's what we can come in. I said, I'm on a committee.
Yeah,
and we can
I'd be happy to help facilitate some of that too.
Yeah, because yes, it is a big problem for us, but this is a problem statewide. This is a problem nationwide. And, communities everywhere are going to see this end. And, local coverage of these things will no longer happen the way that they do. And I, for one, I think that's unacceptable. I think this is an important service. I think it's an important thing that we provide for this community, and we just want to keep doing it.
So thank you, Ryan, and your board sitting behind you. So Steve, I think there was a lot of good ideas here today. Maybe you can kind of think about a proposal of some sort of subcommittee that works with WCT about this. I think Councilor Chine's asking for, fair value market of what we use them for would be great. I do think we look at what the WCAT, the Cable Advisory Committee, what their mission is, and do we expand it? Do we expand the membership? Kind of look at everything that was mentioned today. And then we will hopefully, and I think talking to the MMA is great, because I don't think you're alone in this. And so if we can get the MMA, to even put on a webinar about this, like that would just educate a lot of people. So, okay, do I have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. Move to approve the cable television budget for fiscal year 2024 as proposed.
Second.
Great. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye, 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Kevin.
Ryan.
Have a good night.
Moving on to item 9, flag request. Steve, can I go to you?
Sure. I think that there may have been, let me give a little bit of the process on this. Maybe there was some confusion, we weren't clear. What my policy is that any flag request that comes in to to me in my capacity as town administrator for the town of Wakefield is then I meet with the chair and it's forwarded to the town council to make the decision on whether or not that flag is flown. It's not, I don't make the decision to sit on it and not do it, and I know that in my conversations with every chair that I've worked with, it's the same thing. I will say that nowhere in the policy does it say that it has to go on the agenda, but that's certainly something that I believe happens, and it should happen, and maybe that's something we can talk about at a later date in tweaking that. But that's what happens. It comes in and it goes on the agenda for the only group in town that can call the balls and strikes, as we talked about after the shirt lift decision, is the 7-member council. It's not me. It's not any one member. It's that. So, kind of preface that with that here. I will say that the 2 events in front of you we've had for many years and are very well attended and are events that people really enjoy, and we've had no issues. But I will tell you that if I got a request in from maybe a group that maybe I don't particularly care for, that doesn't matter. I don't really have an opinion. It would go to the chair to put on the agenda for a future town council meeting. So that's kind of the policy that I go by, and I think that maybe there might have been some confusion on that out there. So thank you, Madam Chair, for that brief explanation.
Why don't do we have a motion?
Sure. Madam Chair, move to fly the Progress Pride flag at the Americal Civic Center on Thursday, June 1st, 2023 through Thursday, June 15th, 2023, and then again on Wednesday, June 21st, 2023 through Thursday, June 30th, 2023, and further move to fly the Juneteenth flag at the Americal Civic Center on Thursday, June 15th, 2023 through Wednesday, June 21st, 2023.
Second.
And any discussion?
Good thing you're
Counselor Dombrowski.
So I know this policy came out in, I think, June of last year, and my understanding is that we only have the one flagpole at the AmeriCal, and it's American flag or POW MIA. The policy is intended if you have multiple flagpoles, so I don't understand it to be the case.
By June 1st, we will have multiple flagpoles at the Civic Center.
Correct. There'll be one more.
When did we talk about that?
Well, I would say that, probably was brought up to me right after we did the flag policy last year, but, when Counselor asked me to see if I can do something, I do within my budget. So, correct, it was not decided on by this board.
It just seems like we don't, I think we go back to this point of we don't have even like a criteria or process for making selections, and I don't mean this against the Pride or the Progress flag or the Juneteenth flag. I've said last year, and I'll say again, I have no issues with those 2 flags. I think I would be surprised if anyone does. I guess maybe some people do, and if they do, I don't agree with that. But that's the low-hanging fruit, and we continue to have this issue. I think especially when we don't have any sort of protocol or criteria in terms of how we're selecting, because I was thinking about this and I'm like, all right, well, I know that there are folks in town that are supportive of Choose Life, and so they come to us and they want to have a flag, and I think there's a day, actually, Choose Life Day or pro-life, whatever you want to call it, Choose Life Day. We have folks who may want to fly a Christian flag. I mean, these are not crazy things because you see them. We have a class of whatever celebrating their class reunion, and they want to commemorate it by flying the Warrior logo flag. I mean, these are all very reasonable, real life, scenarios that we might find ourselves in, and obviously, we have the menorah lighting on the Upper Common. You could just as easily have one of many unfortunate anti-Semitic groups wanting to approach us on this. Now, I'm not saying that we then and then we're likely to vote on that. But some of these others are really close calls. Like, I don't think the town has a position on abortion, for instance. We don't have a consensus across the town. I don't think that the town doesn't have a one religion, and the town clearly has different opinions, even on the warrior logo. And so all of these things are the kinds of things that I can see coming up. And so I look at a town like Reading that just has a policy of no, we're not doing it at all. And I know other communities have picked up, sent shirt leaf for the same reason. I went to a Juneteenth event in Reading that was phenomenal. And there wasn't a flag raising, but it was an event. I went to a Pride event in Reading last year, and it was phenomenal, but it wasn't a flag raising. So I don't know, and I don't mean to conflate what the HRC is looking to do in terms of awareness, and I appreciate that. But I think with this decision, this court decision is kind of bigger than any one choice we're going to be making about flags, but we don't even have a criteria at this point. So I think it's just a bad idea, and it's not because I don't want to support the progress flag, the pride flag. It's not because I don't want to support the Juneteenth flag, because I personally do support both those things. But I don't think that allowing that is the right approach, because it's opening up a door to a lot of other tough calls that are, as we all know, are not intended as a form of free public expression, but instead represent an official town sentiment. And there are very few things, I think, where we can say universally there's official town sentiment. And we're going to have group after group, maybe not from Wakefield, I'm sure not, but we'll come into Wakefield and try to test our limits, just like they've done in Boston and other communities. So I just think we're better off staying out of the flag business just in general.
Councilor Chines?
We spent a lot of time on this last year after the shirt lift decision came out. We came up with a policy that was approved by this council, I think pretty overwhelmingly, if I recall, that is consistent with the shirt lift decision. I think that we do have a policy and we do have a process that makes sense. I think it's consistent with what the Supreme Court decision stated. I'm comfortable moving ahead. If we have other requests that come to this council, we haven't. I think that's another point I want to stress is there could be other situations, but there haven't been. This, I believe, Mr. Mayo, is the first request we've had since the new policy went in play.
Correct.
I don't think this is a big deal to move forward. I think, the decision that we vote on and whatever vote councilors decide to make is a vote that is consistent with the policy that we've put together. I'm comfortable with it.
Councilor Vincent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually respectfully disagree with that, and let me address my points as follows. We have a flag policy that was approved last spring. I would have assumed that if there was a decision made to build a new flagpole and where to put that new flagpole, that the town council would have been apprised of it, because we do have a flag policy in place. That's number one that wasn't done in this situation. Number two, when we approved the policy last year, it wasn't ripe to have a step-by-step process, because we had no town-owned property where there were two flagpoles. So the reason we didn't get a request last year, or over the last year, is there was no town-owned property where there were two flagpoles. So now we have a situation where the flagpole is being built at the Americal, and I do think that we need a step-by-step process to figure out what our criteria is going to be. My concern here is, in my opinion, tonight's meeting should have been talking about the process, now that there's going to be a new flagpole, of what we want to do when requests come in, and then later on we can address a particular organization or person's request. I don't necessarily agree with Mr. Mayo that we should have a policy where every single request that comes in automatically gets put on the agenda, because I think that's going to take up potentially an inordinate amount of our time. I looked at what other municipalities are doing, and a lot of this is happening very quickly because of the Supreme Court decision. But in some municipalities, towns in Massachusetts, a request can only be put forward if it's raised by a member of the select board. In Boston, who lost the case, they put together an ordinance, and the language in the ordinance says that only from a mayor's proclamation or a resolution from the city council can a commemorative flag be flown. At the MAA conference that I did not attend, but I looked online at the seminar that they had about this very issue, they had city lawyers from Boston, and they had somebody from the Attorney General's office, And the advice that they gave to towns was to either have a bylaw, which I'll get to in a second, or have language similar to that contained in the Boston ordinance. My concern about this from a legal standpoint, and I said this last year when I agreed on this bylaw, where I agreed with this policy, where once again, it wasn't ripe because we didn't have the 2 flagpoles, so we weren't going to get any requests, that we didn't have to have a step-by-step process then. I'm a firm believer that we should have a bylaw, because the benefit of having a bylaw, maybe for next fall, is that it goes to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General gives us an opinion concerning the constitutionality of that bylaw, and that has already been done with the town of Dayton. So the Attorney General who made the presentation at the MA conference specifically mentioned this situation. I also recognize that under the current Wakefield bylaw, Chapter 56, Section 1, the residents of Wakefield have authorized us to prosecute, defend, and compromise all litigation to which the town is a party. When you have that kind of responsibility, you are also responsible for taking measures to reduce our exposure to liability. I want to make sure that we take all the necessary safeguards to reduce our liability by implementing appropriate processes and procedures for handling flag requests. If a resident of Wakefield sends me a flag request and says, Councilor Vincent, I would like you to fly my flag, I don't know to whom I'm supposed to send that. I don't know how quick. Do I respond back to the person who made the request and let them know that I received it? None of these processes are spelled out in our current flag policy, and I have considerable problems with it. And I find myself now leaning more towards what Councilor Dombrowski says. I've spent a lot of time over this over the last week, and what I should have said initially is I do want to thank Mr. Mullen and Mr. Mayo, because I spent a lot of time late last week sending them emails talking about a lot of the stuff I just laid out for you all, and whether we had discretion, whether to handle any kind of requests. If requests came in, do we have to put them on the agenda? Do we have discretion? A lot of back and forth. But one of the things that I think might solve this particular situation with the request that comes in from the Human Rights Commission is the fact that we have a proclamation. We have a proclamation that the town council signed back in the original one was in 2018, and then it was reaffirmed in 2019. And that was a proclamation that was signed by the school committee, the town council, and the Human Rights Commission. In the Human Rights Commission 2 letters to us asking us to fly the flag, they specifically state that they want to show that Wakefield's place is a welcoming community that values diversity and inclusion. That language is already contained within the proclamation that we have. I am willing to go forward tonight in approving this request to fly those 2 flags as requested in June if we do it based on the proclamation that we have. If we do it based on the request that came in from the Human Rights Commission, I would not support that tonight, because I would rather wait and have processes in place to handle this, and then we can revisit their request. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, can I just clarify that my motion is my motion? I know that the Human Rights Commission, would like the flags flown based on the letters that they sent us. I have not spoken to anyone on the Human Rights Commission, so I do consider this a town council motion. I mean, I made the motion as a member of this body.
Okay.
Councilor McLean, are you?
Some limited comments, Madam Chair. I think that this is a bit different. I've talked to the town administrator about this, and I think it's a bit different than planting flowers on a street, day-to-day management, when we are now, unbeknownst to a few of us until very recently, putting up a second flagpole at the AmeriCal. I think that focuses the issue on the policy. So while I'm very supportive of the groups that are before us, I do have a concern, and I think that we really should, at a future meeting, talk about the procedures that Councilor Vincent is concerned about. I'm not, I'm somewhat torn, because I think we've put ourselves right in the focus here, as Councilor Dombrowski has indicated, by putting up the second post. I believe we may have another municipal building that has 2 flag posts, but we haven't had any interest or any suggestions over there, any requests. But I do think that since this is the area where we have had the flag sign in the past, we are going to see multiple requests. So I would say that even at our next meeting, I know the one right before the election, we don't do anything controversial, but I think we should consider reconsidering the procedures in our policy in the near future. And maybe some other policies too, but I'll stick to the point, I'll stick to the motion. But I do think that this is different when we're giving something, I was out of state last week, don't always get to my town emails when I get home Friday night and I'm exhausted. So over the weekend, you get something brand new and you find out a brand new thing about a brand new flag post going up that focuses the issue, and you said, vote expected on Monday night. Now, that's fair game, but I think there is a line to be drawn here between day-to-day management and something like this that clearly focuses, in my opinion, on policy, that's our job. And I think we should be considering all of the concerns of Councilor Vincent in the near future. Thank you.
Councilor Smith-Galvin?
I guess I'm a little surprised by the reaction to this, because we have spoken about the flag policy numerous times over the last couple of years. And if my memory serves, last year, we in fact did work with the Board of Library Trustees because there were 2 flagpoles at the library. And so I feel like, and then if I recall, then we later kind of put this policy in place after we had the Supreme Court decision. And so my impression was all along that we were going to put a second flagpole somewhere in town to be able to accommodate this policy that I believe we unanimously supported. So I guess I'm a little surprised by the surprise about the second flagpole. Maybe the timing is a little off on that. Like, it would have been nice to maybe do it right after we did the policy, but things happen. And I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but to me, it clearly says here that this policy requires the express vote of town council. And in my opinion, town council reflects the sentiment of the town. And so to me, this is a very clear policy that was put forth with a lot of thought and a lot of discussion. And I have absolutely no problem voting on it tonight.
Councilor Dennehy?
I think if I remember correctly was that I think that we thought that the library trustees would continue maybe to fly the flag, and we had discussed the second flagpole, but I think that we were hoping that that the library would continue to fly both flags. I don't know. I don't really remember, but I guess that I would like to make sure that the Progress flag and the Juneteenth flag are flown in June. That, to me, is really a priority, but I also see the points in terms that Councilor Vincent expressed, and so is there a way that we can, and I do agree that there probably should be a bylaw, because we want to make sure that what we're doing, it doesn't put us to any situation where we as a town could be sued as a result of decisions. And I do think it should reflect the town council makes the decision, and that it should reflect kind of town sentiment. And but I am not an attorney, but I do want to make sure that we are protected by the law. So that's my.
Mr. Mullen?
Yeah, can we have your opinion on this?
Yeah, Madam Chair, got a number of points I want to talk about. First, the distinction between a bylaw and a policy of your council. Really, there is no distinction to be made. A bylaw is passed by town meeting, policy is passed by your commission, by your council, but the The only advantage of a bylaw is that it is vetted by the Attorney General, but that doesn't give you any kind of collect $200, do not go to jail card should you be sued. And you can be sued because of what you do under a bylaw. A Superior Court judge isn't going to defer to the Attorney General. And more importantly, the way the Attorney General writes up controversial decisions is of no help at all. I don't mean to criticize, they're very helpful to me in my day-to-day practice. But that unit will identify controversial issues and say, you should be aware that this is an issue. What should you do? Talk to your town council. So it's no panacea to substitute a policy for a bylaw. And for what it's worth, the Shurtleff case from the Supreme Court basically said municipalities can avoid problems of the kind that Boston had by having a policy. It needn't be an ordinance in a city or a bylaw in a town. Any kind of policy that makes it clear what flag you choose to fly is an expression, in an entirely discretionary way, of the city or town, and a statement by them as to how they stand. Okay? And that's what our policy adopted last June said. It said in each instance, the discretionary choice of the town council to fly or not to fly a flag reflects the will of the town government, and no group or individual shall have a right to dictate that choice. Now, I think when places like Boston have a policy that say, thou shalt not fly a flag unless it is supported by a city council resolution, that doesn't mean that individuals and groups can't approach the city council and make a request. As a practical matter, that's the way the vast majority of any flag flying is going to get done. Somebody requests it, and a city councilor sponsors a resolution. So I don't think that you need to formalize any kind of process to deal with the issue of how we're going to deal with requests. Requests can be made to individual members. Requests can be made by email or letter to your council as a whole. I think so long as you are all made aware of these requests by having them at least included in your package, they don't even necessarily need to be in your agenda. If any member finds a request attractive, he can ask that it be placed on the agenda, or indeed, if it isn't on the agenda, he can bring it up. As a matter of the open meeting law, he can just bring it up at a meeting. So I guess I am rather hostile to the idea of making our policy more detailed about procedures and about criteria. My concern is the more you do that, the more due process you work into the system for the benefit of groups that you want to say no to. And the whole idea of this policy is to make it clear they have no due process rights. It's entirely a matter of discretion on your part. It is a subjective decision. And if the people who make requests are dissatisfied with your decision, you know what they can do? They can run against you. It's a political sanction, not a legal one. But if you have a policy that says, this is the process we're going to go through. We are going to announce a hearing. We are going to invite the proponent in. We are going to hear from them for not less than 5 minutes. We are going to allow people who support them to speak, then people who oppose them to speak. If you miss one of those items in the list, then somebody who's dissatisfied with the result is going to go to court and say, Your Honor, look, they've got this policy and they didn't follow it. Same way if you put in place criteria. I mean, Ed, you bring up a good point about like the abortion issue. What set of criteria could your council establish that would satisfactorily, answer the question, do you want to put up an anti-abortion or a pro-abortion rights flag. I don't think there is one. But if you purport to do that, you're just giving an invitation to dissatisfied applicants to go to court. I guess my bottom line is I could live with either of the approaches from last June. It wasn't a unanimous vote. I believe Mr. Dombrowski voted against it. I could live with Mr. Dombrowski's position and say no flags, period. We're just flying the American flag and the MIA flag and nothing else. Or I could live with what is embodied in this policy, which is absolute discretion on the part of the town council. Nobody has any rights, substantive or procedural, with respect to our purely discretionary decision as to whether and what flags to fly.
Councilor Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one thing that I learned just recently, and it wasn't even in the context of this request, but it was another group that was looking to fly a flag at the library, is I didn't realize, I knew that the library trustees, that was their domain, those two flagpoles. I didn't realize that, I guess, at the latter part of last year, they came up with a policy of no flags. So it's just, I think, the American flag, POW, MIA, and possibly the state flag.
State flag.
Is
on
it?
the second one, yeah.
Yeah, but that's it. And so, and that's something that didn't really get, much coverage. And I don't know how many of you were aware of that. I was not, and it was only because this group was looking to fly a flag, which is a very innocuous flag, by the way. They were looking to fly it, and I said, oh, and they had talked to the library, and that's the case. And I think they made the right call by just not engaging, because to your point, Town Council Mullen, we don't have to have criteria or procedures or anything else. We just don't have a policy. If it's just, the bottom line is we're just not going to fly flags. We'll find other ways in which we can, promote the causes that are important within our community. And I think that's where I continue to land. And the more I've thought about this issue, again, to what Councilor Vincent and McLean were saying, the policy was premised on two flags, and until I just learned that we had a flagpole, it wasn't applicable really, because there wasn't anywhere to fly a flag. I now learn that we have a flag, because the flagpole is going up, so that makes it different. But I continue to say that I think that those communities that have just made the decision to just not do anything, and this is in no way a knock against those two flags. I can't say that strongly enough. I mean, I think I'm the only person openly here at this table that can look at the pride flag in a different way than all of you. So obviously that has meaning to me, but I'm able to set that aside and say, I get that, and I understand that symbolism does matter, but I'm also concerned about going down these paths where I think it can become incredibly divisive. And there are groups and people out there, not in Wakefield but outside, that are looking to do just that. And I just don't think that it's the council's role or probably our best responsibility to focus on it. I think if we just have just a straight out policy that just says we're not gonna fly flags, we're just not gonna do it, I just think we're in a better position, and we don't have to have this debate and this discussion on a regular basis, because these are the easy ones. I'm concerned about the hard ones, and they're going to come.
Councilor McLean.
Just in response to Councilor Smith-Galvin's comments, I was aware of the change in the library vote, and I know that not everyone was. I've talked to the town administrator about that. And over the course possibly of the last months or maybe even year, we've also talked a number of times about how there didn't seem to be a request for a second flag. And that was kind of surprising, and we didn't see it in ARPA, et cetera, et cetera. But that did change recently. Apparently 8 town councilors, or councilors, I think 8 town councilors, Stephen had indicated that, be good to have a flag, second flag. That's what changed the contours here. That's all that changed the contours here. We will vote tonight on John's motion and Jonathan's motion, and I will most likely vote for it. But I am concerned about the future. But I thank town council for his input as well. That's very helpful as well. That's it. Thank you.
Councilor Vincent.
Thanks, Madam Chair. A few moments ago, what we talked about was if a flag request came in, it was going to be put on the agenda. Was that right, Mr. Mayo?
That's my opinion, yes.
And that's a decision I think that we need to make. I don't necessarily agree with that. That is not contained within our current policy. There's nowhere in here that says if somebody files a request, it has to be placed on the agenda. There's different, and my concern about that, and I agree with you, Mr. Mullen, about the due process. That's affording them some due process. That's affording them the right to have their item placed on the agenda just by virtue of the fact that they have filed a request. I don't know that I agree with that. I think we should take a more restrictive vote, or a position where we don't necessarily have to have every request come in be put on the agenda, because then we have to deliberate on that and make some sort of a decision on it. Is that correct, Mr. Mullen? That we would have to do that if it's on the agenda?
Well, if anything's on the agenda, the chair at least has to bring it up, and any member who wants to talk about it can talk about it.
Because one of the things that you said before is that a flag request could be put on the agenda in that the request is just correspondence that's with our material, but it's not an item to discuss at the meeting?
But what I was trying to do was to draw a distinction between two things. I myself was a selectman many years ago, and I remember I used to get a packet of information that sometimes included things that wouldn't come up for a vote on the agenda, but it was correspondence that came into the selectman's office. I believe, I could be wrong, that you continue to get the same kind of package, which is more inclusive than the agenda might suggest. Anyway, whether you do or not, it seems to me that one way of handling these requests, not that they're all that voluminous, would be to make sure that every such request is included in your package, so every member of the town council sees who's requesting what, and if the chair, who's solely responsible for composing the agenda, doesn't choose to put that request on the agenda, any member of the council can call her and ask, hey, please put it on. And the Attorney General has actually spoken about this. If a chair refuses, for whatever reason, to put something on the agenda that is requested by a member, that member then has the perfect right to bring it up at the meeting, notwithstanding the open meeting law, because that person did his best to get it reflected in the notice.
So help me here. So if two requests came in between our meetings, would the chair have the authority to place one on the agenda as an item to discuss at the meeting and deliberate on and vote on, and on the other one, just include it in our package, but it's not an agenda item to be deliberated on? My concern with that is then the town council is not exercising its discretion to decide whether they want to deliberate on this request and not deliberate on that one, unless, now I'm following you a little bit better, that the chair says this one is going to be deliberated on, the other one's included in our package, and then if we decide, and once again, that's not something that's not in our current policy, we could say if one town council member wants the one that's just correspondence and not on the agenda, to raise that to deliberate, that person can do so.
Yeah.
We could decide, does that need to be one person? Does that need to be two members of the town council? Does that need to be a majority of the town council? These are the kind of things that we don't currently have in here. And the reason I wanted to have some sort of a step-by-step process is going back to what Mr. Mayo said, is that it would go on the agenda if upon receipt. And I don't want to have a voluminous number of requests that we have to deliberate on. I want us to exercise our discretion to say, we're not going to bring some of these things up.
Well, I think it would be a mistake to get too bureaucratic about this kind of thing. I don't see the need for a policy that says if 3 members of the council favor a request, then it must be placed on the agenda.
But you're saying one, if one does.
Well, first, the agenda is composed by the chair. So in the first instance, the chair decides what's going to be on the agenda and what isn't. And if you don't like her judgment, again, you don't have to vote for her as chair. But if all members of the town council see every request, then any member of the town council can A, request that she place that on the agenda, or B, if there's no time or she refuses, bring it up at the meeting.
I like that approach, but that would be something that I would want to see memorialized in writing in our current policy, so everybody understands that.
Can I just interject though? That's how every item works, Bob.
Yep.
Like that is how us as a council operate. So
Ma-
I work with Steve. We create the agenda. If anyone wants something that they see, they call, they email, get in contact with Steve. We add it to an agenda. Like that is exactly how it's worked since Julie was chair, since I was chair, since Ed was chair. That's just the way that we as a council operate.
Am I
So
being
I'm not,
reprimanded just because I'm asking some questions
no,
and
but
trying to get clarification?
I'm explaining that
No,
what
it's not
you're
an
asking
explanation.
for, I'm just explaining what you're asking for in a policy is something that we have, that's how we operate. That's our general operating. And I know we don't have a guidebook, but that's how we generally operate.
Madam Chair, just threw you a question to Mr. Mullen. So we follow Robert's Rules of Order. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, any member of the council can make a motion at any time in any of these meetings on basically any subject that's within our purview. And as long as that motion is seconded, I mean, it's subject to discussion and a vote.
Yeah, well, the chair could rule something out of order, but subject to the power of the whole committee, the whole board, overruling her. Yeah.
So effectively, I mean, there is a process and a procedure for bringing this up for a discussion and possibly a vote in these meetings if you know, the council were so inclined.
Right, that's right. And so if you brought up a matter that the chair had chosen to leave off the agenda, the chair might say this is inappropriate because it's not on the agenda, but then you'd have a right to insist that it be on the next agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Dennehy?
I think, Counselor Vincent, is your issue not about something making it onto the agenda? Is it about not, you are concerned that it will be, the chair will put every request on the agenda? And
Well,
not
the
so
chair.
much about,
Mr. Mayo indicated earlier that every request that came in to him would be put on the agenda.
Right.
And that's where I got confused.
right,
And that's where I remain confused. I admit I am the weakest link on this town council. I am the least experienced person on this town council. And all I'm trying to do is get clarification. And the fact that I want to ask my questions and raise my issues is something that certainly is my prerogative. And I am concerned about having innumerable requests being put on the agenda and having to be deliberated on. And I just wanted to make sure that there were safeguards put in place that we did not have to deliberate on all the requests that come in. And I'm trying to get clarification on who sets the agenda, who decides what's going to be deliberated on. And I guess, once again, my question is, if 2 requests come in between now and the next meeting, and now I think I understand Mr. Mullen a little better, the chair could decide that request A is going to be put on the agenda and be deliberated on, and request B is not. Both of them are on flying flags, but it will be provided to all the town council members. And then if a town council member decides that he or she wants to raise it as an issue and be deliberated on, it can. I still fail to understand why we can't put that into our current policy. That seems pretty straightforward. Because somebody might, like me, did not understand this.
We could, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I have to agree with the chair that that's basically a restatement of the way everything on the agenda is handled.
Yeah, well, everybody nods their heads because everybody on this board, with the exception of Councilman McCain, has been a vice chair or chair either here or somewhere else. I haven't. So I don't appreciate being chastised just because I want to ask clarifying questions.
Well, I didn't mean to chastise you.
Not you, Mr. Mullen.
It wasn't my intent either, Counselor, but I guess I'm not understanding your question either. Is there any, Counselor Dombrowski?
I'll just remind everyone, we kind of glossed over this. The library trustees gave this some thought and came up with this policy of no flags. And I don't think that should be lost on us because that was other neighbors, that are in elected positions who had thought about this and they arrived at a different conclusion. So all this discussion we're having and, protocol policy, whatever, It all goes away if we just say we're just not going to fly flags.
Madam Chair,
Cat-
the question.
That's fine.
Move the question, move the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-2. Thank you. Item 10, approval of minutes.
Madam Chair, move to approve the March 13, 2023 Town Council minutes.
Second.
Pat, you're slowing down here.
Oh, sorry.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I just want to say I'm abstaining because I was not here last week.
Great.
2 weeks ago.
6-0, 1 abstention, Sherry.
Feel very missed.
Yes, you're in this.
Item number 11, announcements. Any announcements? Counselor Chines.
Just a couple of sort of recent events that I wanted to reflect on. You know, there's been some great things happening in town. First of all, just a huge thank you to the Senior Center for hosting the annual, now back in person, annual St. Patrick's Day lunch. I know a number of us, Councilor McLean, Councilor Vincent, Councilor Butt, and myself were able to attend, and it was just a great time. The pom-pom ladies were fantastic. I hope we can get them to come to Town Day perhaps in the fall. But, you know, it was just a sign of just how vibrant the Senior Center is and how just really amazing a resource it is for our seniors. So thank you to that. Another event I wanted to highlight, this one's a little close to home for me, was the Youth Writing Showcase at the library. And I say it was close to home because two of my kids participated. But this was an event where they actually had a group of about a dozen young people between 4th and 8th grade come in and write a book that actually is in circulation in the library. And there was a book, kind of a reading presentation and a book signing presentation this past Saturday. And it just really highlighted to me, I mean, it was wonderful seeing my own kids be able to enjoy it, but, listening to excerpts from all of the stories, seeing just the amazing work that these kids did, but also the amazing work that the library staff did to put this together. I mean, this was dozens and dozens of hours of, editing and designing. And I highlight it because it's just a really great example of the just phenomenal programming that the library does. And I was really proud to be a member of this community and to be, kind of part of this process and to see the time and effort and really love that the staff put in terms of making this happen. So thank you to them as well. And then finally, just a congratulations to the First Baptist Church for their groundbreaking on their new facility. I know Mr. Mayo and I were able to attend, and it's just great to see something positive kind of rising from a tragedy there, and really excited to see that building come up.
Great, thank you. Counselor Vincent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. March 29th is National Vietnam War Veterans Day. It's significant to note that it's the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. On March 29th, 1973, that was the day that the U.S. Military Assistance Command Vietnam was disestablished, and also the day the last U.S. combat troops departed Vietnam. In addition, around that same time, within a day or two of that, Hanoi released the last of its acknowledged prisoners of war. The other thing I wanted to note real quickly about the memorial and the decision that the Capital Planning Committee had with going forward with that memorial was, I thought the timing was good that it was in March, because March is Women's History Month, and the theme this year is celebrating women who tell our stories. And Harriet Noel Flint, who's the one who bequeathed the money to build that memorial back in 1902, was the person instrumental in telling South Reading's story at the time of the Civil War, and subsequently Wakefield after the war story about its role that it played during the Civil War. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Counselor Dombrowski?
Just a quick plug that it is, like, Christmas has come earlier this year. The pit is opening up this Saturday at 8 a.m. Nahant Street Yard Waste Facility, 8 to 4:30. Every Saturday you'll have the opportunity to go there, and every second and fourth Sunday as well, plus obviously Wednesdays. So please get your permits from DPW, get that yard waste collected, and make your way to Nahant Street. Thank you.
You've highlighted another week that I'll avoid doing yard work.
Get all those boxes that are in your garage.
Absolutely, yes.
Nothing? Anyone else? I just want to, and I'm forgetting the exact date, April 8th, I believe, is Caitlin Bergari-Bedian's recycle event.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
April 8th. More information on our website, on social media, right? You can recycle mattresses this year, recycle flat screen TVs, a lot of stuff. A great thing that she coordinates with the town, but really appreciative of all that she does. It's a great event last year. It'll happen again. I think it's April 8th, right?
It is April 8th.
The
yeah,
Saturday?
I
Yeah,
think
Saturday, yeah.
great.
And the Gator Gallop, I think, is it this weekend? The Gator Gallop, Saturday?
April 1st.
April 1st.
Oh, that is this week.
The
isn't it?
Saturday.
I know, I was thinking that we had a longer
Feels
time.
like so much further away than it should be.
Sherry or Tom, any updates?
You know, just on one point from Councilor Vincent about the anniversary in Vietnam. Anyone who's interested, I highly recommend visiting a client of mine, which is the American Heritage Museum in Hudson and Stowe, Massachusetts, which is one of the greatest collections of American military history memorabilia in the world. And their latest acquisition is a big chunk of the Hanoi Hilton, which is the notorious POW prison where a lot of Americans were kept for years during the Vietnam War. And they got it largely by convincing the Vietnamese that they were going to use it to show how bad those terrible Frenchmen were who built the prison years before the communists took over. So,
Thank you. Steve, anything to add?
Just one thing. There has been some discussion lately, and I think one of the public participation requested some information on MIPA and the vocational school filing. My understanding is that the MIPA has asked for some additional information, some additional plans from the vocational school. I don't know what that means. I don't know the process very well, but they are reviewing it. That's the bottom line. So people have said they weren't, but that's a state function, not us, but just want to make people aware of that.
State MIPA is the Mass Environmental
Environmental
Protection
Protection Agency, yeah.
And Steve, in response to one of the other public commenters we had, like the traffic advisory and other groups are looking at
Yes,
all
yes.
of that, right?
You know, there are some off-site issues that we should consider, sidewalks, and we've been looking at that area for a long time. And going up Hemlock Road really also dovetails with us because we have parking areas there too. So those are things that will be looked at as well.
Great, thank you. Item 12, any matters not anticipated for the agenda? And then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Great. All in favor, say aye. Great. Meeting adjourned. Our next council meeting is Monday, April 10th at 7 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.